years old and you can't even drive? I can. Are you stupid, eh? Are you a stupid fool? Well, why can't you drive then? You can't even drive. A bit grey today, isn't it?
Enter Stranger.
Deeply subversive.
How you doing, D? You all right?
about to spit out my Coke Zero.
I've got so many of these clips now. What about this one?
The recognized symbol of excellence in sports entertainment.
Oh, that's some good 80s action there.
But unfortunately, it's not fitting because we're going to be talking about the 90s today. We're into the 90s, probably the penultimate episode in our deep dive into the Thin White Duke himself, David Bowie. This, out of all of the times that we've prepped for these streams, D, was probably some of the biggest reevaluations of records that certainly that I have underwent. Although last week was pretty major. Do you know, since last week, I've had the title track of Never Let Me Down in my head, which is making me think it's actually probably quite a good song.
Yeah,
it's quite catchy.
Yeah, I had a couple of those in my. I mean, I had Day In Day Out in my head, days and days. So yeah, I'm telling you, it's the secret gem.
It's the secret gem. Well, certainly, I have come to think because of the fact that I've spent a whole week humming "Never Let Me Down" tracks on and off. That you were probably right that tonight is worse. But I'm going to be, I may be controversial this week. I think there may be some records here worse than tonight.
Yeah,
as we're about to get to.
Strangely enough, I had exactly the same journey as you did, and I made some. I mean, first of all, my reevaluation of "Never Let Me Down" from last week was something. But yeah, I think that we share certain opinions about the 90s. Which I didn't know. I mean, it really took re-listening to these records. I mean, I think there's something to the fact that I don't really listen to most of these records. I mean, I haven't listened to some of these for many years. So I think there's something telling in that. But we'll certainly get onto that.
Yeah. I mean, before we get into it, I should say, by the way, buy all my courses, Foundations of Writing. Foundations of Rhetoric. Now is a good time. People are going back to school. It's a good time to pick up your courses, only from the academic agency, or you should join the channel or buy a mug or support. You can do a super thanks these days as well. If you're listening to this late, you can do like a late super chat called super thanks. I encourage all such things. But yeah, just before we get into this record, the late 90s was the height of my Bowie fandom. So I remember Outside coming out. I remember Earthling and Hours. They all came out during like the peak years of my Bowie fandom. And you know what it's like, because he was my favorite artist at that time, and because I was kind of like a Bowie maniac or whatever, I listened to those three albums into the ground pretty much. I kind of forced myself to like them. As I guess as you do with certain things. So my relationship with those three albums is a little bit different as a result. Although I even remember back in the 1999, kind of it being a bit of a cope defending Hours. Like even back then I was thinking, is this cope? Am I just kind of but we'll get back to that in a moment. Oh yeah, I'll turn entropy on in a second. But where were you in your kind of Bowie fandom in the late 90s?
I was just going to say, I mean, of course, I was in my mid-20s in the 90s, in that part of the 90s. And so, of course, I was a Bowie admirer, but I was the sort who I just didn't want to have anything to do with it. I didn't like most of them. I certainly had very bad feelings about a lot of the 80s, because I was very much the kind of not so much the hits, but I mean, I had that whole run of favorite records from the 70s, and so I was much more apt to just be still listening to Low and Lodger and such, and I was again. I remember when all these the 90s records came out, unlike the 80s ones because I was too young then. But I remember all these, and I remember not liking not liking most of them. So I sort of ignored them. I mean, I remember 1999 and Hours, and I was just so disgusted with it that I never listened to it again. I mean, reviewing it for this stream was the first time I'd listened to it since probably 2000 or 99 or 2000. So yeah, I was much less of the sort of completist super fan, and I was more of the, Bowie just lost it for me. So we'll talk about all that.
I mean, the other thing I'll mention about being a teenager back then is that how can I put it? So do you remember last week we were talking about how when the video for Loving the Alien came out and the BBC were kind of shaking their heads and all that sort of stuff, where Bowie kind of in the mainstream culture kind of hit a moment where he was kind of uncool. I would say that in terms of the mainstream culture, by which I mean like BBC or ITV or like the music magazines and so on, there was a bit of a kind of Bowie revival in the 90s, and it was mainly through the Britpop acts, especially Blur, but also Suede and various other acts around at that time, basically going on and on about how much they love Bowie in interviews and things like that. And they kind of brought him back into prominence, kind of in a retrospective way, as a kind of hero to all the bands who were out at that time. And now obviously he was the hero to all the bands in the 80s as well, but in such a way that I don't know, there was something about what he was up to in the mid 80s there that kind of dropped him off the relevance, whereas there was something about the way he did it in the 90s which meant that I can only I don't know, describe watching like Top of the Pops at the time or something like that show. Was it TGI Fridays? Was it, or TFI Friday? The Chris Evans thing. You were probably in America at that time, so maybe you had a slightly different experience. But you could kind of stick on songs from Outside and Earthling and so on in amongst what was out at the moment, and it wouldn't seem that out of place, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So he kind of slotted in. The other thing I remember about that time is that he won this Life Achievement Brit Award in 1996, where he appeared wearing high heels and doing some of his I think he did Hello Space Boy and maybe a couple of old songs at the Brits. And that seemed to be a big deal back then as well. But like back when people paid attention to those sorts of things, nobody. See, this is the other thing that's different now, I suppose. Nobody pays attention to anything anymore.
No,
I don't get the impression that teenagers are watching the Brit Awards now, but certainly I was in 1996. So I do think that these records came out in a slightly different context for where Bowie was in the culture, if that makes any sense. So yes, but with all of that said,
people also need to realize that he spent, I think, in a way, he spent almost a decade in the wilderness, in sort of. I mean, between 87 and sort of the mid 90s, he was, as you say, he was sort of nowhere, kind of, until that sort of revival. So, and there's big gaps in the 90s as well, where he sort of fell silent again. And of course, everyone needs to remember that it basically the next album after Never Let Me Down from 1987 was 1993. That was the gap between Never Let Me Down and Black Tie White Noise. So
yes, and that album, Black Tie White Noise, was number one in the UK charts, right?
Yeah.
It came out in 1993, hailed as his best album since Scary Monsters Day, which is going to be an ongoing theme with these. But there's a couple of things in the lore just behind this album. First of all,
pull up the images first. There's a
okay.
few that precede Black Tie Night, White Noise.
Okay,
I want to
all right.
get over them quickly.
All right, let me pull this up. This looks like it's from the Fame 90 sessions, but this one here.
So yeah, this is 91. This is the early. I mean, it's more difficult to find kind of good photographs of Bowie from these periods. But yeah, this is 91. This is when he was still working with Tin Machine. The next three photographs are from a Tin Machine gig, and I couldn't resist them because, you know, it's there's not that many photographs of shirtless Bowie playing the guitar. So
still skinny, mind.
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
I mean, would this be a good moment to mention something else that is going to be an ongoing theme as we get through these 90s albums, which is the presence of the lead guitarist from Tin Machine, Reeves Gabrels, who, well, I'm just going to say it out. I'm just going to say it out loud now, Dee. And as we go through these records, you can tell me what you make of this assessment. I think that Reeves Gabrels, even though he was working with Bowie, secretly wanted to be working for some like fucking post grunge band. Like he wanted to, like he'd have given his like two front teeth to be a guitarist for the Foo Fighters or something.
The Foo Fighters, yeah. The flaming lips, yeah.
I mean, he just like his dream was to be in a post grunge band, and I think that his influence is going to cast a shadow on these 4 albums, 4 or 5 albums we're about to get through here, because whatever Bowie was trying to do, I think Reeves Gabrels was trying to get to Foo Fighters.
through David. Can you imagine?
Yeah, and the times where these records get bad is when Gabrels wins that kind of creative battle. I mean, this is a kind of headcanon thing that I've made up over the years, but I don't know. Like once Gabrels is gone, that Foo Fighters thing seems to go as well.
It does. It disappears. I mean, I think that in some ways Reeves Gabrels was a malignant influence on Bowie, but we'll see.
Okay, so where do we go from here? Yeah.
So next up, this is 1992. These are photographs from the Freddie Mercury tribute concert. So people remember Freddie Mercury died in 1991, and then in early 92, Queen hosted this enormous concert at Wembley, which was a sort of charity concert, some sort of Freddie Mercury trust or something they formed, and it was the big show. You know, I mean, again, as you say, back then, you know, there were these events that everyone watched, and certainly everyone watched. I think over 1 billion people watched that live, that concert. But this is from that period, and the next 2 shots are actually from the concert. Bowie wearing an amazing lime green suit. Yeah, there he is with. So during that concert, he performed Under Pressure with Annie Lennox taking the Freddie Mercury part. Strangely enough, of course, he never performed Under Pressure with Queen. They never actually performed it live. There was only the recording. So this was sort of the first instance of Bowie with Queen backing him up, singing the song. And then also during that concert, he played All the Young Dudes with Ian Hunter from Mott the Hoople and members of Def Leppard as the backing vocalists, and with Mick Ronson. He was reunited with Mick Ronson on stage for the first time since the Spiders from Mars era. And it was also, sadly, Mick Ronson's last appearance. He was already dying of cancer, and he died, I believe, later that year. So it was his last live performance with Bowie. But it's great. So yeah, they play Under Pressure, then they play All the Young Dudes, and they play Heroes. I quite like that concert and all the stuff around it. I would urge people, if you look on YouTube, you can find like rehearsals for it, and you get wonderful things like, you know, Seal rocking up in an Escort LT, or Liza Minnelli throwing herself at Elton John's car, or Elton John wearing a ridiculous pink and blue shell suit, talking to
Why?
David Bowie for the first time in
Why
20
is
years.
it? But to me, Bowie looks like he's dressed. I think it's the time more than anything else, but he looks like he's about to go on Songs of Praise with Harry Seacombe or something like that. Like, what is this?
Well, it's sort of fascinating. This, I mean, I think he looked amazing in this concert. But do you want to? Something else extraordinary happened during this concert. Do you want to play the clip?
Yes. Now, if we disappear, folks, if the stream cuts out for any reason, we will be. But just hold on, don't go away anywhere. It will come back as we've experienced before, won't it, D? So we'll. But it could, if we're sniped by copyright or something, it will come. The stream will come back. So
hopefully it won't be. This is a short clip.
Yeah. So let's have a look.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name.
Does that play?
Thy kingdom.
Yeah, I hear it. I don't see it.
It's not moving, is it? Let me try that again. Hold on. I don't know why it's not moving, D.
Who art in
no,
heaven,
I don't see it.
Hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us the trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
I mean, you could show the next image.
Go.
I mean, people complaining about not being able to see it. I mean, Bowie was just kneeling, and you see it in the next slide.
I don't know why it wasn't moving, but
it's a file type or something.
There we go.
Yeah, that's a shot of him. I mean, that's what he was doing. So that's what you missed. But I mean, that was an extraordinary moment. I mean, the era when you could kneel in front of 80,000 people at Wembley and recite the Lord's Prayer is probably far behind us.
Yeah, I also think that this has been a kind of quiet theme all through the records, at least since I would say Young Americans, if not even before. That, which is kind of Bowie's search for some sort of faith or some sort of something to believe in, and as we'll see, at least in terms of the lyrical content, this runs through these albums as well, which we'll get to. So what else have we got before Black Tie?
And Bowie, I mean, well, yeah, and also, I mean, he wore a cross for most of his career. I mean, we'll see many photographs of him. So, he was, it's a very complex journey for him, I think, spiritually, and it's difficult to say what conclusions he came to. This era, of course, so a couple of weeks after this concert, you can go to the next image. He married his wife Iman, who was people are aware of a Somali fashion model. He had met her in the late 1980s, and yes, they were married basically 2 weeks after that.
I have a full name here, which I haven't come across very often, because she's like Pele. She's known just as Iman, right?
Yeah.
But her full name is Iman Mohammed Abdul Majid. That was her full name. She was Somali Muslim. Is that right?
Abdul Majid Jones, after she married Bowie. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Or just Imam Bowie. She'll be called in the press and things like that. But yeah.
Yeah, and I think that this is one of the sort of interesting, happy stories in Bowie's life, because of course they remained, by all accounts, very, very happily married for up to the end of his life. And they had a daughter together in, I believe, 2000. And and he spent most of the 2000s just being a husband and father. I mean, he really didn't do very much in most of the 2000s. A few things, but after he retired from performing live, he was he I think he really wants to sort of make up for being absent from a lot of Duncan Jones's life. But I think that this is quite a white pill that he sort of finally found somebody that he apparently loved. And also interestingly, given the religious content and the prayer and all of that, I mean, they married, but then he insisted that they had a Christian wedding at a consecrated church rather than just having a registry marriage. So they went to, I believe, a church in Florence and had a proper marriage, religious marriage, not a Catholic one. So not entirely proper, but so yeah, that's so Iman, and she will play a sort of she's around a lot from here to the end. So yeah.
Yes, and yeah, there's a picture of them. I guess is that on honeymoon or something, or
honeymoon on the beach? I don't know.
There she is.
Yeah.
There's more of her.
Yeah, and she's given some interviews and such. She actually, I think, recently press was sort of hounding her if she's have romantic interests or whatever, and she said no, she's never going to marry or again or have a relationship again in her life because she said he was the love of her life. So yeah, it's quite nice.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I don't think she did much after they got married, did she? Because she was meant to be in like an actress and model or whatever, but what actual like actress or modeling work did she do after she got married?
She's done some. She did some model. I mean, she's in her 70s now, so
right. Okay.
Obviously, and she looks quite good. She doesn't look overly surgically enhanced, shall we say? So she looks pretty good. But no, she did sporadic modeling all over the place. She famously appeared in Michael Jackson's "Remember the Time" video in maybe 92.
Was that the Egyptian one?
Yeah, where Magic Johnson is the pharaoh and she's like Nefertiti.
Yeah, I remember her from that. I didn't. I didn't know that was her. Okay, that was a good role for her. She kind of looks good. Like an Egyptian queen or something, I suppose.
She certainly does.
Yes. If you buy into Weaver's Kangs, whatever.
Well, maybe Nefertiti. I don't know. Anyway, so if you want to go ahead to that one photograph. So the other thing he was doing in 1992 was he was playing a role in Twin Peaks. This is a photograph from the set of Fire Walk with Me, which is the controversial Twin Peaks film that David Lynch made in 92 that was booed off the screen in Cannes, amongst other things. But that's Bowie and David Lynch there in the center, who played I can't remember what his character was called. He was like sort of deaf, so he shouted everything. And Bowie was very weird in that film.
You a fan of Fire Walk with Me?
I liked it. I mean, it's not a good film, but I liked it nevertheless for various reasons. There's some wonderful visual and moments in it. Yeah, what was Bowie's character's name? Was it Jeffries?
Is that the one where? What's the film where Bowie is really old? Is that film? Or was that in?
No, that is not that film. Bowie appears. He's gotten trapped in the lodge. If people are aware of Twin Peaks lore, and
I hope he's not trapped in the lodge.
He says some wonderful. Not trapped in your lodge. Yeah. He says some wonderful lines like, "We're not going to talk about Judy. We're not going to talk about Judy at all," in that accent, which is hilarious. The Prestige, maybe you're thinking of, or
no. In the Prestige, he plays Nikola Tesla. Yeah. I'm talking about a film where Bowie plays like this like over 100-year-old like decrepit old man, and he's almost like decomposing. Some like weird vampire film. I can't remember what it's called.
No, I'm not aware.
It's yeah, maybe that was The Hunger. That we talked.
So anyway, yeah. So Bowie in Twin Peaks. So people can go check that out if they like. And also the funny thing is of course, he's just dressed as Bowie. I mean, even as a character, he's just sort of David Bowie in 1992. So
okay, so now we do get to
yeah,
Black Tie, White Noise.
1993. Yeah.
Is he wearing contact lenses on that front cover? What happened to his different color eyes? I thought he had one brown eye and one green eye and one blue eye.
He does. Yeah, his dilated pupil is sort of a hazel green color. I mean, his dilated iris is sort of a hazel green color, and his other eye is blue. I don't know what happened with the cover of Black Tie, White Noise. Originally, that was not the idea for the original cover. We'll talk about that later after we talk about the album. But yeah, I don't know.
I have
I
have a little bit of lore for this, which is that basically he was feeling inspired by the wedding to Iman,
yeah,
which basically gave him the impetus to make his first solo record in 6 years. The desire to write his own wedding music might have kickstarted the creative process. A solo album had been planned for several years. Tracks had been laid down in late 1990 with members of Bryan Adams's band. Fuck's sake.
Oh.
Can you imagine? But it was never released except for a cover of Dylan's Like a Rolling Stone, to be found on Mick Ronson's solo album Heaven and Hull, released in
Heaven and Hull, yeah, which was his last. That was what Ronson was working on at the end. So yeah.
Also, outside the Tin Machine project, Bowie had guested on Adrian Belews' 1990 album Young Lions. So clearly, Bellew had forgiven Bowie for his harsh treatment a few years before that we talked about last time. On 2 tracks, the infectious and sadly overlooked Pretty Pink Rose, a demo of which had been recorded with Reeves Gabrels in 1988, although Gabrels is not credited as a co-writer. And the less essential Gunman. The commercial failure of Tin Machine 2, and perhaps more importantly, the restriction the band must have placed on Bowie in terms of control of the final product, led directly to him once again stepping into the limelight as a solo artist. In 1995, Bowie told Interview magazine that he saw his Tin Machine phase as a necessary period of self-evaluation. Once I had done Tin Machine, nobody could see me anymore. They didn't know who the hell I was, which was the best thing that ever happened, because I was back using all the artistic pieces that I needed to survive, and I was imbuing myself with the passion that I had in the late 70s. The slate wiped clean, he resumed his solo career with an overtly commercial offering. We'll come back to that statement in a moment, because I'm not convinced that Black Tie, White Noise is overtly commercial. Bowie has mythologized his career in order to give the impression that he has always been a cult artist and has never sold many records and has never wanted mainstream popularity. But at various stages, he has always backpedaled and gone for the mainstream by the jugular. Nile Rodgers was once again brought in as producer, but Black Tie, White Noise is no rerun of Let's Dance. Whereas on the latter, Bowie seemed to be willing to give Rodgers full reign creatively in helping to shape the overall sonic terrain. On the sequel, it is Bowie who is calling the shots, with Rodgers helping to put the action onto tape with a commercial sheen. There is action aplenty. For a start, Bowie sings wonderfully well. We'll come back to that assessment in a second, giving perhaps his best vocal performance yet. I strongly disagree. This is Peg, by the way. No, this is David Buckley, not Peg. One of them on more recent tours, his vocals had showed signs of strain, and he lost some of his upper range. Hardly surprising after years of almost constant gigging and nicotine abuse. On Black Tie, White Noise, the songs fit the voice perfectly, however, and Bowie's lower, richer, rounded vocal is just the ticket. I will say he does sing in a very low vocal all through the album. That did strike me listening through that the vocals are very low. They seem mixed low in the mix as well. Lester Bowie's excellent trumpet playing, taking over the role of soloist from the lead guitar, provides a novel twist, however, and Bowie's asthmatic sax playing is prominent for the first time in 15 years. Yeah, we'll talk about that sax in a second as well.
Saxophone.
Um,
Yeah, he
now,
played. He quite prominently played it during that Freddie Mercury tribute.
now,
The Ian Hunter's singing and Bowie is screeching away on the
now,
saxophone.
now, I'm afraid, Dee, that do you remember we were talking about a creeping shit livery in Bowie last
Oh
week?
yes, yeah.
It says, "Young Americans aside, this is also Bowie's blackest album to date."
Ugh.
By black, they mean like the race black. In fact, it was conceived as a musical recreation of and comment on not only the racial mix in his marriage, but also the active creative process which had long infused his work, taking black styles and overlaying a European melodic sensibility. And Peg has a quote from Bowie, which I will read in the interest of completeness. He says, the title itself was a minor masterpiece. That's Peg. This is Bowie. "I think Black Tie, White Noise refers to the very obvious," David explained, "the radical boundaries that have been put up in most of the Western world. It also has a lot to do with the black and white sides of one's thinking. I think it goes a little further than simply the racial situation. I think at this particular moment in time, it's very important to promote the coming together of the disparate elements of any nation, specifically America, where the record was written, but actually, I guess, even more so now in Europe. Over and above the album's directly political concerns, the title operates as a multiple pun on Bowie's own musical affiliations and studio techniques. White noise itself is something that I first encountered on the synthesizer many years ago," he explained. "There's black noise and there's white noise. I thought that much of what is said and done by the white is white noise. Black tie is because for me, musically, the one thing that had really turned me on to wanting to be a musician, wanting to write, was American black music. For a number of years, I worked with rhythm and blues bands, and my participation in them formed my own black ties in that area of music." So ends the quote. So there we go. I mean, it's not as bad as it could have been, but still, the black and the white in the title is kind of self-consciously racial as well.
Yes, yes, and I think there's a whole tie-in with his wedding to Iman that sort of maybe spark this but he's all, I mean, he for much of his career, I mean, if you remember in the 80s, he was excoriating MTV for not playing enough black artists on in rotation. And so, I mean, this has always been a kind of something on the simmering away in his consciousness.
There's one more bit of lore before we get to the actual things, and that is some of the Britpop elements that were already you forget that Britpop started a bit earlier, and it was already underway in 1993. It says early in 1993 should have been an extremely propitious time for a new Bowie album. Seattle grunge, denim-clad anonymity was giving way in the UK to arty, camp, laddish Britpop, and some excellent new groups such as Blur, Elastica, do you remember them?
Yep.
Suede, The Auteurs, and Pulp, who all carried echoes of Bowie somewhere in their music, their packaging, or their approach to music making. Suede, in particular, fronted by Brett, a bisexual man who had never had a homosexual experience. Anderson. Do you remember Brett Anderson?
I
didn't know that, but
no, I remember Suede, but I don't remember him specifically.
A bisexual man who has never had a homosexual experience sounds like many bisexual today, eh? Borrowed heavily from the Ziggy era glam slam. I must have given Bowie some satisfaction to see Black Tie, White Noise depose the debut Suede album from the top of the UK chart on its first week of release. However, from that moment on, it was all downhill for the Bowie comeback. In America, he had signed with a small label called Savage, which promptly went bust at the time of the album's release, seriously affecting promotion and distribution. Bowie's decision not to tour the album must have significantly affected sales too. So even though it was number 1 in the UK, in the USA, it was only number 39, which is something of a theme with Bowie albums, right?
Typical. Before I
Yes.
forget, I just want to address something about that big long quote about black and about
Yes.
white noise and such. White noise is a thing. In fact,
Yeah, that's his white noise. Yeah.
yeah, everyone's heard that. I mean, it's the white noise, especially if you're old enough to remember analog signals from televisions. You would hit on the wrong one and you would get that. But white noise is basically it's random signals that have an equal intensity throughout the whole spectrum of sounds that you're hearing. So it's basically just the full random sound of all frequencies at similar power. And it is used in synthesizers, like certainly early analog synthesizers. For instance, if you're creating like the sound of cymbals, or which have a lot of noise associated with their sound, you will use white noise, and it can be processed in certain ways to synthesize instruments.
Am I not correct in thinking that some of the Berlin, like Heroes in particular, the album, in fact, the albums with what's his name on lead guitar,
Fripp.
Fripp, yeah, that Fripp uses a lot of white noise in his in his general technique. There's a lot of white noise on Heroes as an album.
Well, there's a lot of noise. Yeah, I mean, it's not white noise, but you do get that kind of fullness of sound because he did use a lot of feedback and distortion, and sometimes with feedback you will get, sort of the equivalent of that. I mean, but true white noise is a very specific thing. Bowie talked about black noise. There is no such thing as black. I mean, black noise means silence. So because of course white noise means full frequencies at the same intensity. Black noise just means that there's no sound. So technically there really isn't black noise. So I don't know what he was talking about there.
I mean, he does say he's talking about the black tie is his black ties to black music. It's really fucking shit.
God, so crap.
It's like yeah.
It's also funny because one of the suggested names for Tin Machine was white noise, and Bowie said no, that's racist. So
I see.
I don't know. Anyway,
so when we get into the actual album, I have to say, before we even talk about the individual tracks, when I was listening back to this, I was 3 tracks in, and I think I messaged you saying, "This is shite." I can't remember. Like, it is so bad. This album. I mean, it's way like for some reason in my mind, I was thought, well, there's a couple of good tracks, but it's kind of middling album. But it's shockingly shit.
No.
I have to say I enjoyed this the least out of all the albums so far that we've covered, and I see it as a worse than Both Tonight and Never Let Me Down.
Yeah, and strangely enough, I came to the exact same conclusion. I mean, I don't remember this record at all. I never listened to it, and listening to it again was painful. I mean, I literally had to try like on 3 different occasions. I just couldn't get through it. I just hated it so much, and I don't remember hating it that much. But I think you're right. I think it's worse than Tonight, because Tonight has Blue Jean and Loving the Alien, and they're better songs than anything off of this record.
I'll also say that all this stuff from Buckley about it being commercial, I'm not sure if I agree with that. Like, I mean, one of the first 3 tracks is a cover of "I Feel Free" by Cream, right? And in Buckley's own notes, right, it says a cover version to send purists running for that CD remote control fast forward button, which actually works rather well. No, it doesn't. Bowie completely reconstructs the song into a rocky techno freakout, and Mick Ronson plays his last performance on a Bowie album with a fine guitar solo. Bowie's vocal is so hilariously deep at one stage, causing severe aural distress, one might imagine, to dogs, cats, budgies, and the like. I honestly think it's like Bowie has always interpreted other people's songs and done cover versions. This is probably worse than that that Beach Boys cover from tonight is so fucking bad.
It's up there. It's up there.
Oh,
There's another bad cover on this record, which we'll get to. Also, the other thing that's so irritating about "I Feel Free" is that was his reunion on record with Mick Ronson, and you can barely hear Mick Ronson.
it's
You know,
awful.
he's barely on there. Like, you know, this was the last time they performed together.
So there's this curious mix of bloody horns, like trumpets and bloody saxophone, noise, like when we say white noise, like literal just noise. Bowie singing really, really low and buried down in the mix, as we were talking about, and like at the same time, how can I put it? Like really shit early 90s dance.
Yes, exactly.
I hate it.
Well, this also started a whole period that he did that for years and years that he did using in my opinion, too much programmed digital drums and synth. You know, as much as I love analog synth, I hate some of the things that had their advent in the 80s, and I just think he just relies on it too much. There's so much electronic crap on this record, and I think this record sounds bad. It just even the remaster, it's very hard on the ears. It doesn't sound good at all.
Then as if to make things worse, right? If the album couldn't get any worse, so the first 3 tracks, which is this risible, like if I was Imam Bowie and The Wedding sung at my played at my wedding, I think she would have been fucking gutted. It's just like, what the fuck? Like, you know, you're marrying David Bowie, and the best he can come up with for your wedding is The Wedding, like one of the shittest instrumentals ever. You've Been Around. David Buckley claims that there's a Reeves Gabrel solo at the end, but he says rather naughtily it's mixed so low and so far down by Bowie in what might have been a deliberate gesture of defiance against the democracy of Tin Machine that he is barely audible above the rhythm track. But I would say that Bowie's own vocals are really low down in the mix as well. They're just buried by all this shite noise that we're talking about, like the trumpet and the stupid drum machine bullshit. And then so anyway, we get to the title track, Black Tie White Noise, featuring
Albie
Shaw, and oh my god,
that's Albie Shaw with an exclamation mark, by the way.
This to me, the title track of Black Tie White Noise, may be the worst Bowie song on. Like, I can't think of a song I dislike more.
It's a shit song.
And apparently it's about the LA riots as well, according to these liner notes.
So what happened to Bowie is, of course, he after he married Iman, they went to Los Angeles to try to buy a house. Now, why he would want to go back to Los Angeles, which he described as hell, and which almost took his life, I don't know. But they went to Los Angeles, and they ended up being quarantined because of the LA riots, which happened right after they arrived. Basically, everyone was there was like a stay-at-home order because of all that shite. And so that apparently had a big effect on him, and they decided then to move to New York instead of LA.
But I mean, just listen to some of these lyrics. I'm sorry.
Yeah. I was going to say, are you going to read the lyrics?
Getting my facts from a Benetton ad, looking through African eyes, lit by the glare of an LA fire, black tie, white noise. I've got a face, not just my race. Bang, bang, I've got you, babe. Putting on the black tie, cranking out the white noise.
Oh,
fuck's sake. This is like, to me, I don't know why. Now that we've come through it, why is this album seen as a comeback to form after Never Let Me Down? Because it is. I am starting to feel offended for Never Let Me Down, honestly. It's just
exactly. Let me read my favorite verse from this song. We reach out over race and hold each other's hands. then die in the flames singing, "We shall overcome." What's going on? There'll be some blood, no doubt about it, but we'll come through, don't doubt it. I look into your eyes, and I know you won't kill me. I look into your eyes, and I know you won't kill me. You won't kill me. You won't kill me, no. But I look into your eyes, and I wonder sometimes. Actually, it gets slightly based at the end.
Well, I mean, can I just say that I don't know where that certainty comes from, because just in the past week we have seen in Philadelphia
Oh,
a woman try to help
yeah,
a
just murdered.
man of a man of you know,
A,
the
a
African,
black man.
a black man, let's just say it, just like, and he shot her in the face.
Yeah,
And
just killed her.
I hate to say it, I mean, Greg Johnson put it best on Twitter. The moral of this story is, don't try to show love and kindness to these people, because they just, you know, when I look into your eyes and I know you won't kill me, is completely the wrong sentiment you should ever have.
It certainly is. I mean, I'm going to refrain because
It's
I don't.
just,
I want you to keep your channel, but and coupled with, of course, reactions to the passing of Her Majesty.
yeah, we'll be talking about that tomorrow, no doubt, of course.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. I'm not full of the most goodwill at the moment. So,
Yes.
anyway,
Reach out over race and hold each other's hands, eh?
what year did Fresh Prince come out? Was it
It
93?
sounds like 1993. This is like, I don't know, peak kind of Cope era or something. But I don't know. I mean, to me, this is the worst of all the Bowie songs. I would say that the album does arguably start to get better after this point. So there's a pretty good single called "Jump They Say," which I remember
Yeah.
coming out.
Yeah.
It's the return of his brother, Terry, who I believe had committed suicide around this time.
Yeah, I think maybe 1990, 91, something like that.
Yeah, so this is basically Bowie coming back to the theme of Bewley Brothers and various other times where he's touched on this, also in Scary Monsters, of course. There's a pretty good music video which I remember. Some people in the chat may remember this, but in the UK there was this music, like back in the days before everybody had MTV and so on, because you didn't really get MTV unless you were a Sky subscriber or whatever. My parents didn't have a satellite dish until maybe 1997 or whatever. But I remember there was a video package show called Movies, Games, and Videos, which had like really awful CG graphics, but it kind of like, there were CG graphics of like video vaults, and they would pick the video and it would play it. Yeah. And I remember Jump They Say getting pretty heavy rotation on that show, that Movies, Games, Video show. And it's one of the better videos of his career, I would say. Yeah, it's pretty personal song. Bowie says of it, he says, he was looking for some emotional support in his life, and he found it mystifying. It's also connected to my feeling that sometimes I've jumped metaphysically into the unknown and wondering whether I really believe there was something out there to support me, whatever you want to call it, a god or a life force. So yeah, Jump They Say. Terry actually committed suicide in 1985. D. So
okay. I thought it was.
Yes.
Yeah, I thought it was around this.
So it took him 8 years basically to kind of touch that as subject matter.
I'd never seen the video, and you sent it to me. Yeah, and it's quite good.
So I would say that's the high point of the album. That single, Jump They Say. Would you agree?
I would say. I mean, there's a couple of other songs that are okay. Jump They Say is probably the best one.
There's Night Flights.
Yeah, which is a Scott Walker song.
What do you think of that cover?
I just find it a bit boring.
Yeah. I don't have ever. I mean, David Buckley says it's undoubtedly one of Bowie's best ever cover versions, along with Sorrow, Wild as the Wind, and Criminal World.
Okay.
So it's got some fans out there.
I mean, I just listened to it like a couple of days ago, and I can't even remember it now.
I listened to it this morning, Dean, and I can't really remember it.
Remember it.
I mean, I just remember waiting for it. I remember I kept on checking. I was like, when is this going to end? Because that's the other thing about this album, by the way. All of the songs are 5 minutes plus. Oh, I hate that. I hate that. At least have the decency to be 2.5, 3 minutes. Like,
no,
all of them are 5 minutes, and they all drag as well. Then there's another instrumental called Pallas Athena.
Oh yes, Palestina. Yeah, it's all right. It's all right.
Which was all right, yeah. Then one of my personal favorite tracks on this album, Miracle Goodnight, which features I think I've told you before, the Balinese frog chorus. So the riff, the catchy five, apparently, so he didn't record the frogs, but he basically told, like, he wanted to capture the tune on the guitar. So it's a recording of the Balinese frog chorus, but on a guitar, I believe.
Okay, yeah.
So
frog.
Yeah, I mean, and to me, apart from Jump They Say, Miracle Goodnight is the only other good song on this album. So
yeah, Miracle Goodnight is good. I didn't know about the frog thing. I mean, of course, yeah, and Bali was where his ashes were spread. I mean, he had quite a connection to that part of the world. I think he'd gone there in the 80s on holiday and quite took to it. So, and then we have "Don't Let Me Down and Down," which was written in Indonesian. And in fact, on Recall 5, there is the Indonesian vocal version of that song, which you may want to check out as a curiosity. But it's okay.
That's also got a really low vocal, I seem to remember.
Very low vocal, yeah.
He's got like weird accent on there as well.
Yeah, I think he's sort of it was aping the Indonesian
and then
thing. Oh, then
is this just like a kind of like sax piece from Looking for Lester? Just like a kind of instrumental, is it, or is there singing by?
Looking for Lester is an instrumental, I think. Yeah, it is. It's an instrumental.
David Buckley claims that Niall and Dame David bring jazz to the pop masses.
Yeah,
sounds about as good as it.
Don't remember. I don't remember. I just listened to it. I don't remember it.
And now there's another cover.
Oh,
which is, it's a cover of Morrissey. I know it's going to happen someday.
Yeah.
What do you make of this one?
Well, there's a story that goes along with this. So Morrissey, of course, had gone solo around this time, and he produced a record called Your Arsenal, which was produced by Mick Ronson, and this was 1992, so the year before Black Tie White Noise. And Bowie he liked Morrissey. He quite liked, Morrissey's the work that he was doing around this time, and Morrissey loved Bowie, of course, just like Gary Newman before him. Morrissey was a big fan of Bowie. Well, Bowie listened to Your Arsenal, and like so many times before, when Bowie was reviewing the work of a young artist who admired him, he suddenly decided that Morrissey had ripped him off.
Right.
So he thought that the brass, I believe it's the brass bit at the end of I Know It's Gonna Happen Someday on Morrissey's record, was ripped off from the end of Rock and Roll Suicide from Ziggy Stardust.
Yeah.
And so as an act again, unconfirmed, but the speculation is that as an act of sort of quote unquote revenge, Bowie recorded a cover which he deliberately produced so that it had the same sound as Ziggy Stardust. So he put the drummer in a drum booth. He did the vocal in a booth. I mean, which is part of the strange, slightly thin sound of Ziggy Stardust because they recorded it that way. And yeah, the speculation is that he produced that cover as a slightly satirical poke at Morrissey, sort of accusing him of ripping him off.
I see.
And it's dreadful. It's a dreadful cover. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. I think it's terrible.
Apparently, on hearing the cover, Morrissey himself was reported in the press saying, "Ooh, it's grand." So, so I guess Morrissey were,
Well, they supposedly had a falling out later on because Bowie invited him on the Outside tour as to open for him,
right?
And so he started to do this thing on the tour where Morrissey was doing his set, and Bowie would come on the stage and sort of secret police like grab like members of Bowie's backup band or members of Morrissey's backup band and drag them off the stage until there was no one left but who were replaced by Bowie's backup band, and then Bowie would force his way on the stage, and then he and Morrissey would do Bowie duets.
I see.
And apparently this and other treatment from Bowie was so irksome to Morrissey that he left the tour. He quit the tour. And,
I would love Dee to go back and write behind the scenes conversations between Morrissey and Bowie.
Morrissey.
I can just imagine, like, Morrissey, isn't it awful the number of coloureds who are coming over here with Bowie recoiling as like a guardian journalist.
Okay, well, yes, and of course this was around the time that Morrissey started to get into his more shall we say edgy political phase. He started doing his National Front bit. So yeah, and Morrissey left the tour, and Morrissey has said some nasty things about Bowie in the intervening years. So I think there was some unpleasantness there.
So anyway, it closes with the wedding song again, but this time there are words on it.
There's words. What are the words?
Doesn't improve the song really.
Silver wings, angel for life, dreaming alone.
It's abysmal. It really is. I'd be embarrassed if I was Iman. Buckley says here Bowie admits to having written deliberately a cliched, gushing, saccharine, sweet love song for his bride. This is basically the opening track with words on. It's fine in itself, though inferior to the instrumental version. Still an effective way to end the official set. I don't know why David Buckley is such an apologist for this record.
Very odd.
Let's see if
Heaven is smiling down. Heaven's girl in a wedding gown. I'm gonna be so good, just like a good boy should. I'm gonna change my ways. Angel for life.
Ugh.
Just like every good boy should. My, someone catch a priest. Sorry, I'm noticing that weird little, I don't know if that was intentional, that little quotation from Beauty and the Beast from Heroes.
I don't know. To me, this is the worst Bowie record.
It's a bad record.
If I'm thinking now, because I want to next week, I want to do a 26 album ranking. As things stand, this is number 26 for me. I just think it's bad. Yeah, I put it below the DRAM debut and Tonight and Never Let Me Down. In fact, Never Let Me Down is retroactively climbing because I keep on finding myself singing it.
Yeah, exactly. Taking its rightful place as the gem of the 80s. Yeah.
Now, he was quite productive in 1993 because hot on the heels of Tonight, there was also hot on the heels of Black Tie, White Noise.
Black Tie, White Noise. Yeah. So That's from the set of Jump. They say if you go back, this weird picture of him, this was meant to be the cover of Black Tie White Noise, and what they were going to do is they were going to cut that picture right down the center and mirror his face. So basically, just mirror the one half on the other half, and when you do that, it looks slightly weird and scary. But they decided not to do that and to just put that big, boring photograph.
But they maybe the idea was to retain the two blue eyes. Maybe that's why they've coloured in the eye.
Oh, that may be why they did it. Yes, because
Yeah.
mirroring the picture. Yeah, you would, and it because of course our faces aren't symmetrical, and so when you make a face symmetrical by doing that mirroring, it looks weird. Like it looks unsettling, and I think maybe they would sort of.
I would also say that Bowie I would say his face is even less symmetrical than most people's.
Yeah.
Because I've noticed over the years that he very much has like a good side that if you watch him in performance and you look at the way he does his hair and things, he favors one side when he's facing the camera. And that can't be a coincidence with someone who thinks that much about image, you know.
Yeah, he knew his good side. Yeah. But anyway, that's the photograph that they were going to use, but they didn't do it. So, all right. So if you want to go, this has my vote as the worst record cover of Bowie's career. I mean, what were they thinking? Look how awful that is. Oh.
The Buddha of Suburbia was a BBC, like a mini series for the BBC, I want to say. It was actually a novel originally by
it was
Hanif Qureshi.
Yes, Qureshi, that's it.
Have you ever watched it?
I've not watched it. No,
utter shite.
Never seen it. Is it shite?
It's in the same. I'd put it in the same kind of moral category as what's that film starring Daniel Day-Lewis from the mid-80s. Hold on a minute. My Beautiful Laundrette. You ever see that? It's kind of.
I kind of like My.
It's in the same. Like, to me, it's in the same. I how can I put it? There's something about the leftism of the period that doesn't date well, in my view.
No.
And Buddha of Suburbia's got a bit of that. I have
to be fair, I only liked My Beautiful Laundrette because I got to see Daniel Day-Lewis snogging an Asian. But
oh, right, I see. Okay.
Yeah, but I know what you mean. That kind of earnest sort of, you know, it's before the kind of caustic racial grievance type of leftism that we have now. But it's a kind of sort of.
I mean, one of my great life ambitions, is to reappropriate much of that material. Let's say from My Beautiful Laundrette to Naked by Mike Lee. Have you ever see that?
Mike Lee, yeah.
Yeah, I want to appropriate that era of like leftist cultural output for the right. Because there is a latent, if you look past the shit liberty and you look past the kind of anti-Thatcherism and so on, there is a latent reactionary critique in some of that material. And I want to tease it out and I want to save it and I want to reclaim it for the right, which is a strange thing. But I think there's a hidden reactionary element in that period. So maybe we could do the world's first dissident right reading of Buddha of Suburbia. What do you reckon?
Oh, I'll have to look into it. Yeah, I would have to think about that because I haven't, you know, like I said, I haven't seen this, and yeah, that I like that. I like it.
Yeah. So for whatever reason, Bowie did the soundtrack of this. It was recorded in a mere 6 days.
Yes. And they only used one bit of his music. Like most of the music on the record does not appear in the show. They literally use one track and part of one track. So
yes, but I have to say, on my re-listen, I kind of dug this. I thought
Yeah.
this is a much better record than Black Tie, White Noise for one. And two, it's a lot less instrumental than I recall.
Yep.
In so much as the instrumental tracks seem to have like vocal bits at the very least.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like, I mean, do you remember how I said there are bits of Black Tie that are kind of like cringe early 90s dance?
Yeah.
This seems more to me like kind of like bits of early Prodigy,
Yeah.
like Charlie Says era Prodigy kind of stuff. I kind of dug it. I actually think it's a really listenable album. So
Yeah, I liked it as well on review. In fact, I like it. It's one of, I think, the better things he did in the 90s. I think also, I mean, because they had very little money to do it. It was all done at Mountain Studios with no one. I mean, basically, it was him. Dave Richards was the producer, who was the producer of Never Let Me Down, by the way. Back to Dave Richards. And the Turk,
oh yes, the
Erdl,
Turk,
yeah,
Edal, yes, is back.
yeah. Mike Garson came in for
The
one track.
mastermind behind Never Let Me Down.
Exactly, Dave Richards and the Turk, yeah. Mike Garson came in for one or two tracks, and the rest was just Bowie and the engineer and the Turk. I mean, the producer and the Turk and the engineer. It's sort of a amazingly casual record. And there's some really good material on it. I have to skip that track called "Sex in the Church" because he just says "sex in the church" so much that it gets stuck in your head, and it's quite malignant. His voice is quite altered. Sex.
But Bowie wrote an essay in the liner notes apparently.
Oh,
where he says the CD booklet contains an essay by Bowie on the project, his influences and working procedures, and an assessment of the state of pop in the 90s. The best bit is the list, the stockpile of residue from the 1970s used to oil the creative juices. Pink Floyd, Harry Parch, Bromley, Di Mauer, the OJs, and Drugs all feature. That's Drugs, the band. The essay ends with a piece of flag waving, which reestablishes Bowie's Englishness in the wake of quote-unquote Brit pop. Here is a taste of the polemic. Bowie writes, we have so much unnurtured talent in this country, it borders on the criminal. While in America, popular music has never been more divisive, both racially and socially. So there we go.
all right.
Yeah, yes. So that's what he wrote. I kind of feel that maybe away from the limelight, there was more. Bowie still had something left in the tank. That's what I thought this album told me when I was listening to it. So,
and I think also relieved of the pressure to produce his big comeback. Like Black Tie, White Noise. Just sort of unrestrained. There's a lot of references in the lyrics to various things. I mean, in the title track, he does the chorus is day after day after day, Zane, 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 Uber Lashen, which is from Man Who Sold the World from what song ends with Zane, Zane?
Apparently in that essay, Bowie actually registers his dissatisfaction with the fact that they didn't use his soundtrack on the BBC. It says,
he was upset about that. Yeah,
he says this collection of music bears little resemblance to the small instrumentation of the BBC play. so there we go. It only reached number 87 in the UK chart. However, 10 years later, Bowie called the Buddha of Suburbia his personal favorite of all his studio projects. Amazing. He said, I felt really happy making that album, he recalled. Overall, it was just myself and Erdal Kilzaki working on that. Erdal was a fellow musician, Turkish, living in Switzerland. He had studied at an Istanbul conservatory and for his degree and has become a proficient on every instrument in the orchestra. This led to a lot of testing on my part. I would produce an oboe from my jacket pocket and say, hey, Erdal, Don't you think oboe would be nice here? And he would trot off to the mic and put down a beautiful solo and then say, that's quite good. But how about if I doubled it with the North Albanian frog trembler? And he would. The album itself only got one review. And it so happens, it was a good one. So there we go. It's got zilch in the way of making money or marketing, and that's a real shame," said Bowie. Lenny Kravitz turns up as well.
Yeah, Lenny Kravitz in one track.
But basically, it's Bowie, this Turkish dude. Mike Garson pops in. There's a producer called 3D Echo.
Yeah.
But note who's missing from the personnel. Who's missing?
I'll tell you who's missing. It's Reeves Gabrels.
Yes, the malign and disgusting Reeves Gabrels with his. And have you noticed that the album is completely missing that kind of pull towards industrial grunge that he was always trying to go for?
Yeah.
And so it's bolstered my case that Gabrels was a malign influence.
Gabrels was bad.
Was there any, rather than going through each of the tracks in turn, was there any ones that stood out to you as you were listening?
Yes, I mean there's a very long track called I'm looking through the track list now because I can't remember the name of it. Pulling that up. There's a very long track called "The Mysteries," which to me seems very evocative of kind of the sort of the instrumental period from the Berlin records.
Yeah,
which I quite like.
I quite like the track just before that, South Horizon, which apparently was also Bowie's favorite track. It's got piano all over it, I seem to recall.
There's got a lot of piano in it. The last track, Ian Fish, UK Air, is another one of those kind of sort of Berlin era sounding songs. I really like this record, and certainly I would suspect many people have never heard it. So I think also, again, that cover single-handedly, I would never buy that. If I saw that, like, it looks like something from the bargain bin. It looks like the fucking like direct to VHS, sort of, I don't even know. So they changed it. In 2007 they gave it a different cover when they
Do you have the alternative cover?
I don't have it in the thing. It's a picture of Bowie sitting on a bench with a very bright spotlight on him. I mean, sitting on a cot, and it's just got his name there. It's not a brilliant cover, but it's better than that one.
Oh yeah, he looks like David Beckham on that. What a strange, terrible album cover. Yeah. It's like Bowie, Beckham era Bowie.
Beckham Bowie. It's better than the original cover.
Let me just show people what I'm talking about. Though.
People have to see it, but it's still better than the original cover.
David Beckham Bowie.
Well, it's 2007, so it's
Yeah. Okay. But yeah, it's good though. The point is, it's good.
It's good. We like it and we recommend it.
I'm in a way, I'm sad that we've come to that conclusion because it's kind of a cliche to say it's a hidden gem, but it really is.
It is.
Yeah. So then let's get back to the. I may have to go off and get a drink in a second because I'm running out of.
All right. Then we've got. So this is 94, 95, and Bowie takes up with Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails. And in fact, he'll controversially invite Nine Inch Nails to open for his shows. I believe that they did that during their Outside tour. And both Nine Inch Nails fans and Bowie fans apparently hated each other, and they hated each other's acts, and there was some unpleasantness. I
don't like the idea of the uppity mid-90s Nine Inch Nail fan who doesn't like Bowie. What an obnoxious sounding creature that is.
Terrible creature. Who went to the show and left when Bowie came on. These are disgusting creatures. So
Okay.
yeah, so that was the beginning of a collaboration that went on for a number of years. Bowie and Nine Inch Nails. Strangely enough, of course, is that later on who would hook up with Trent Reznor and Nine Inch Nails and go on tour with them, but Gary Newman.
I see. Okay.
So yeah,
Yeah.
Gary Newman always on the trail of David Bowie.
So what else have we got here?
What do we got next?
Oop.
Just
Hints of Un Chien Andalou there.
Chien Andalou. Well, of course, and just like that line from and it is the track All the Madmen from Man Who Sold the World. But yeah, in the Buddha of Suburbia, he quotes it Zayn 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 Uber Le Chien. Did you know that? Did you know that Bowie played Buñuel and Dali's film Un Chien Andalou before the shows in the Isolar one, which was the Thin White Duke era? He played that for the audience.
No, I didn't. I didn't know that. No.
Yeah, that was one of the opening things for that tour, is to show them Un Chien Andalou, which
that would have been back in the consciousness of alt rock fans, of course. Courtesy of the Pixies, who had that song. Debaser quotes Un Chien Andalou.
Yeah. Chien Andalusia. And of course, Bowie loved the Pixies, but Bowie, that was one of those big kind of cross pollinations. I mean, Bowie, I think, took a lot from the Pixies in the 90s. So that was certainly an influence there.
So this is still late 94. Bowie,
these are all 90. These are all 95. Just gives you people an idea of,
what do you look like?
What mid 90s Bowie looked like.
I mean, he kind of looked like this for most of the 90s, I would say. This was his basic look, I mean, sometimes his hair would be longer, sometimes it'd be shorter, but this was basically it. The kind of the little goatee and the kind of highlighted short blonde hair.
Yeah, the semi-gog soul patch and the
Yeah, that was typical mid 90s Bowie. And then his dress would become more outlandish as time went on.
It got a bit insane there, and he also started to use heavy eyeliner for a while in the mid later 90s, as the Prodigy did. So that was I think that was a thing. Trent Reznor did it too. I mean, that was certainly a 90s thing amongst a certain crowd of people.
Yeah, and I mean, there'd be lots of casual makeup around, that suede that we mentioned, kind of just goths in general. There was who else was around that time? Smashing Pumpkins, of course.
Billy Corgan, and
there was just lots of that sort of thing around in the mid 90s. But anyway, smack bang in the middle of the 90s, he brought out this album Outside.
Or One Outside.
Well, yes, it was slated to be the first of a 5-album sequence.
5 albums?
Yeah, it was going to be a 5-album sequence, Steve.
Good God.
And much like a certain academic agent, Bowie also had ideas that got grayed out after a while, because clearly at some point he was just like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. There's never going to be like a 2, whatever it was going to be. I think it was slated to be 2 Earthling or something like that, but he couldn't be bothered to finish the cycle, because nobody cared about the story, which we'll talk about in a second. I mean,
we will. Yeah.
There's meant to be this concept running through this album. It's about I think it's about an artist who wants to create the perfect crime or the perfect murder, which sounds a little bit like the plot of Rope, the Alfred Hitchcock film.
Yes, Rope with
but in a more arty way. So it's more reminiscent of. Do you remember in Silence of the Lambs? Not Hannibal Lecter, but the actual killer in it, the one.
Yeah, Buffalo Bill.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of artistic murderer is more Buffalo Bill than the characters from Rope. Would you agree with that?
Would you fuck me? I'd fuck me hard. Was she a great big fat person? Yeah, Buffalo Bill, who famously does a dance to a song called "Goodbye Horses" whilst sewing a woman's suit out of bits of skin.
Here we go. Nicholas Pleb, possibly the only man in history to actually note what the story of Outside is, right? Outside is probably Bowie's bleakest album yet, and that's saying a lot. It deals with the murder of baby Grace Blue, a 14-year-old victim of an art crime, her innards having been exhibited as art, and the investigation into the death by Professor Nathan Adler, art detective. After years of avoiding overt characterization on stage and on record, Bowie went wild on Outside, creating and impersonating other figures too, such as the 22-year-old prime suspect Leon Blanc, a 78-year-old art, drug, and DNA print dealer Angela Touchstreak, the omnipotent leading lady Ramona A. Stone, and the Minotaur. In typical Bowie fashion, this is a concept album with the concept left out. There is a narrative of sorts, but its direction and the extent to which the William Burroughs style cut-ups are actually meant to convey any literal meaning is open to debate. And in truth, it's hard to get that involved in the story in the first place. So even Peg has failed to get a story, D. Whereas Ziggy's cartoon-like imagery instantly struck a chord, and Diamond Dogs proffered a rewrite of a familiar novel, Outside's obsessions are likely to remain, mainly those of their creator. Sorry, that was Buckley, not Peg. So
okay, Buckley.
maybe Buckley will have see if he bothers. No, doesn't look like even he bothers.
No one bothers.
No, nobody's bothered. But there are a bunch of characters, and there's this artist, and that apparently Bowie had befriended Damien Hirst around this time.
Yes, Bowie was friends with Damien, and in fact, he even went to Damien's studio and made one of the swell pictures. I don't know if you know those big round paintings of Hirst, which he put into a big rotating machine and put paint on them, and the paint flies around. And yeah, he let Bowie make one of those himself, which was auctioned as part of the Bowie's art collection, worth a lot of money. So yeah, the association with Damien was certainly a big one. Also, I think this album, there is a lot of David Lynch in this record. I mean, it is, to me, it has always seemed like a slight rip-off of the entire Twin Peaks story of the agent coming to a strange town to investigate the murder of a young girl. Of course, he was friends with Lynch, and he was in Fire Walk with Me and all that. So he would have been, he was a big admirer. And of course, then it goes the other way, because of course a track from this record was used as the opening and closing theme of Lynch's Lost Highway, which was made in '96, I believe. So yeah, there's a lot of strange back and forth there. But the story to me has always seemed like just a pastiche of Twin Peaks in a way.
There are a couple of other influences I point to before we get into the album property, which is that I think Scott Walker lurks on this album too. Specifically the late Scott Walker of Tilt, which was actually released earlier in 1995, but apparently the sessions for Outside predate when that came out or something. But to me, the vocal styles and some of the strange sounds and the slightly horror vibe of a lot of Outside, that's the only other record I can think of that sounds anything like Outside is late Scott Walker, Tilt.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I certainly would agree with that. I have to listen to it again with that in mind. But
unfortunately, there is Reeves Gabrels is back on lead guitar. So
Reeves Gabrels is back. Well, I'll tell you who else is back, which we didn't mention, which is Brian Eno.
Oh
So
yes, of
this,
course. Yeah, Eno is
yeah,
back. Yes.
yeah. So this is Bowie's first record with Brian Eno since Lodger. Um, so quite a reunion, and there's a lot of Eno going on in this record. A lot of the way that they did this record. I mean, it's back to complete improvisation in the studio. Everyone was sort of doing their own thing, and they would just play these sort of chaotic sessions where they would just someone would start some sort of music bed, and then others would
Hmm.
join in, and then Bowie would just sort of like improvise lyrics and do the cut up thing. And so it was all very much back to the kind of Eno type production methods that Bowie, used so effectively.
Yes, and just looking at this, Alomar is back as well.
Yeah,
In
yeah,
the band, as is Mike Garson. So there's quite a few kind of Bowie stalwarts now,
yeah,
in the mix, as it were,
yeah.
along
Uh,
with the maligned Gabrels.
with the line Gabble. Sterling Campbell on drums. Who Sterling Campbell would be a kind of fixture in Bowie's live band for a while after this. The Turk is there for
Yeah, the
this as
Turk is
well.
in. Yeah, I
The,
could
the
see him.
Turk
Erdel. Yeah.
the Turk is in, and Bowie produced this, and Dave Richards again, the producer from Never
Never
Let
let
Me
me.
Down, is back for this as well.
um, yeah. Now, what I would say is the presence of Reeves Gabrel. So it's like a tug of war. Okay, between. So all on the one hand, you've got all of that what we just mentioned: the David Lynch, the Scott Walker, the Eno's influence, and all of that. It's pulling the album in a much more avant-garde direction. It's kind of
Yeah,
art rock, if that makes any sense. But I would say that Gabrels is constantly pulling the sound in the direction of what I can only describe as kind of like industrial stadium rock or something like that. There's like a
yeah,
kind of I can only describe it as a post grunge. Um, it's like that kind of like early Foo Fighters, something like
yeah.
that. So in a strange way, because of that, Outside, I would argue, is probably the hardest Bowie record since The Man Who Sold the World in terms of like hard rock.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. There's some quite heavy tracks. I mean, it's quite dark, which is Man Who Sold the World was also quite dark lyrically, and it did this sort of atmosphere. It's funny because in a lot of these things there is a retrograde element. I find the mid to late '90s work there is a datedness to it, and I think that datedness is possibly down to, like you said, Reeve Gabrel's attempt to constantly drag it into sort of the industrial electronica, sort of rock.
I just think he would have been happy like supporting fucking Marilyn Manson or Slipknot or some
Yeah,
bullshit,
I don't know how he don't know how he got in there. Slipknot.
But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
He is the
yeah,
lead guitarist, and for whatever reason, he is dragging the sound to this mid 90s post grunge, which makes it sound very contemporary, I guess, very mid
yeah.
90s.
Yes,
And
yeah, and
yeah,
then also the Nine Inch Nails sort of thing. I mean, yeah, a lot of that going on. I should also mention, of course, that the cover of this is actually a painting by David Bowie. I mean, David Bowie had, since his '60s days, he's always been involved in sort of avant-garde art and painting, and he's painted off and on, he painted off and on all over the years, and he really got back into art in a big way in 95, 96, into the late 90s. He did all these paintings called D heads, um,
mhm.
which were kind of like these portraits of people that looked sort of like this, very sort of depersonalized and blurred and such. This is actually a self-portrait D head. So yeah, this is a painting by Bowie. He ended up being on the board of Modern Painters magazine. And he also really beginning in around '87 and especially into the '90s really started to collect art in a big way. I mean, he ended up, as I said, with quite a significant collection. So yeah, the art thing was very had sort of really roared back into his consciousness. And again, the theme of this record, I mean, such as it is this idea that there's a society that views crime and murder as an art.
Yeah, and that still remains quite a big thing, you know, that true crime scene. Like, there's a figure who used to be in our circles who's involved with that. He does true crime stuff. Who was that guy who did the rap responses to me once upon a time? Teabag. Do you remember Teabag?
Teabag, yeah.
Teabag just does like true crime stuff now. But it's kind of.
Oh right, yes, he turned it. Yeah, he to that crime guy. I think he's called. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a crime channel. Also, there's a whole. I mean, I don't know. People who remember the '90s, there was a big thing in the '90s about this kind of what's now it's a slightly sort of cringe transgressiveness. You know, I mean, it's certainly you can go to Nine Inch Nails and all of these acts. This kind of, you know, quasi, you know, horror film sort of, you know, we're dark and edgy and criminal. You know, there was a big obsession with that, and certainly I think Outside is very mid '90s in that.
But it doesn't feel transgressive when those people are running your government as they do today. So
no, that's the problem. Of course, it's no longer transgressive when it's coming from the fucking White House.
Yeah. Now, I would say that David Buckley may nail it when he with this paragraph. He says there are a couple of lame moments, and the narrative section sometimes hits 7 out of 10 on the Bowie cringeometer. But whereas, for example, the Buddha of Suburbia had 4 genuinely great tracks, Outside has more than twice that many. And there's some fine drumming from Sterling Campbell, some funky and instantly recognizable rhythm guitar from Carlos Alomar, and Reeves Gabrel's Ex-Tin Machine puts in some excellent work too. So by David Buckley's reckoning, there are at least 8, 9 or 10 great tracks on Outside. And I was just looking at the track listing. If you take out the segues, that's 1, 2, 3, 4,
5. I think there's
five spoken word segues, which I mean, I was telling you this when we were DMing before. I remember, like back in the 90s, you could program CDs to skip certain tracks. People probably don't remember doing that, but you can obviously do the same thing on iTunes or whatever these days. And I used to program Outside to skip the spoken word bits because I fucking hated them. And if you listen to it like that without the spoken word element, I think it's a pretty good album, you know.
It is.
And I mean, I don't know about calling all of the other tracks great, but you know, we've got Leon Takes Us Outside, which is kind of skippable, but you know, the title track, Outside, Heart's Filthy Lesson, A Small Plot of Land, Hello Space Boy, The Motel, I Have Not Been to Oxford Town, which is kind of catchy.
It's a catchy song.
No Control, The Voyeur of Utter Destruction as Beauty, which sounds pretentious, but it's actually all right. Wishful Beginnings, We Prick You, I'm Deranged, Through These Architect's Eyes, and Strangers When We Meet, which is kind of a Buddha of Suburbia kind of holdover or update or whatever. But that's a pretty strong album, you know.
It is. It is. I will reveal that this is my favorite of the '90s records. Outside.
It's the strongest in Scary Monsters, D.
His best avant-garde works in Scary Monsters. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Heart's Filthy Lesson. Because you know we were talking about how the album is contemporary, but I mean nothing else from 1995 sounds like the Heart's Filthy Lesson.
No.
So it's kind of like, while it does have this contemporary element, it is also unique as well, I would say. So
it is, and it isn't dated in the way that some of his other '90s offerings later on, I think would be.
Yeah. A small plot of land is where Buckley says, "Who's been listening to Scott Walker's Tilt then?" Because it is like because it's got the insane like gas and jazz piano,
Yeah.
and then that kind of haunting, almost operatic, the vocal from Bowie. Yeah. A difficult listening experience, but at least it's better than almost anything on tonight, says Buckley. Hello Space Boy, which kind of rocks pretty hard. Hello Space Boy was released as a single by the Pet Shop Boys, who remixed it.
Yeah.
Now, do you prefer the version on the album, or do you prefer the Pet Shop Boys version?
I prefer the version on the album. The Pet Shop Boys remix to me, it's just redolent of that time, and it has that gay disco thing that I despise. So I don't like it. It's all right, but I don't like it as much. I'd rather have the album version.
Yeah, that was a kind of big-ish hit at the time. That was played quite a lot.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I think that coincided with that Brit Awards appearance I mentioned. I think the release of Hello Space Boy. In fact, I want to say the Pet Shop Boys appeared at the Brits with him performing that remix. I don't quote me on that, but I just seem to remember that was around that time, because it was a little bit after Outside came out that the remix came out. Anything else on the album that you want to mention from those tracks I mentioned?
I just think anything else, yeah, I really like this record. I mean that it's not one of the '70s records. I mean, it just isn't. You're not going to really find yourself kind of humming most of these tunes. Although I'm Deranged gets stuck in my head because I'm a deranged artist sitting in his Minotaur maze. So I can empathize with that one, but it's still a very good record, and it's despite it is teetering on the edge of pretentiousness at all times, but it never really falls over because there's some genuinely good ideas and some really good material in it. It's arty, but and again, it seems like it would be pretentious, but it isn't. I think the story elements are the thing that you want to just sort of avoid, and the story's never resolved. I mean, as much as I don't quite remember all of the aspects of the story, but it ends on a cliffhanger which was never resolved. So I think it's best to be sort of yes, thank you, Dr. Prepper. Deranged, thank you.
Yeah, well, We Prick You is kind of catchy in its own strange way.
Yeah.
I always remember I have not been to Oxford Town. It has a kind of sing-song element to it where it's a bit catchier than you might imagine. But I don't know. It's just it sounds like a Bowie album to me.
It does, and I just think they, it was all good, and they were, it sounds like a fun time. I was also very proud that I was able to figure out what the typeface on the cover is, so that I used that for the thumbnail.
Yes, that was some good work there.
If you want to pop to the next couple of images, I just included a couple from the interior of the record. The next one.
Oh yeah, I remember this well.
Yeah, if anyone has the opportunity to look through the booklet that comes with this, it is the most '90s collection of bad early Photoshop filters that you could possibly imagine.
Can I just mention something as well? Is it just me, or was Bowie very into his kind of Cockney stylings in the mid-90s? Like but on both this album and on Earthling, there's a lot of that whole Mockney thing going on.
He slips into that voice again and again. But there's a lot of shit Photoshop shopping in the inlay to this, so check that out. And so Outside, so I give it the D seal of approval as the best '90s record. All right, so where are we? We're
this This looks like that Brit Awards appearance to me.
Yeah, this is 90. These are all 96. So, and of
Yeah.
course, this is when he started to get a bit more extreme. That's a very 90s image, you know.
You see,
giving
I think that the person he was channeling was Keith Flint
Keith
in a lot
Flint
of this.
from
This is, and I don't know if he's ever admitted this anywhere, but it seems to me that Prodigy were a perennial influence right through the 90s, but on Earthling, as we'll see, it would come very much to the fore.
Yeah, and I mean, as I said before the stream, Prodigy he toured with them. I mean, they were.
Oh, did he? Right. Okay.
Yeah, they were an opening act for the, I believe, the Outside or Earthling tours. So yeah, so
Oh,
so there you
now
go.
what's Warhol doing in here? See.
Well, this is what I have waited to talk about. So in 1996, amongst all these other things going on, there was a film which was produced by an artist called Julian Schnabel, who was a very well-known 80s artist. If you go back to our Warhol streams, you will hear mention of Julian Schnabel. He was amongst the crop of kind of new figurative painters that were heavily promoted and heavily self-promoted through the 80s. And so in 1996, Julian Schnabel decided to make a film about Jean-Michel Basquiat, who was another one of the kind of neo-figurative painters from that period, who died in 1989 of a heroin, or 1989 of a heroin overdose. Basquiat was a friend and minion of Andy Warhol for a while in the mid 80s. And again, if you watch those streams, there's lots of the Basquiat material there. So Schnabel wrote this film, and amongst the strange casting decision, he hired Dennis Hopper to play a Swiss art dealer called Bruno Bischofberger, or Bischofberger, and he hired David Bowie to play Andy Warhol. So Warhol, of course, has been a constant influence throughout Bowie's career, as we all know, from the track called Andy Warhol on Hunky Dory to Bowie's early meeting with Warhol in the 70s. And they, of course, they occasionally, you know, there's a few instances in the diary where they meet up in the 80s. So yes, Bowie plays Warhol in this film, and it's not a good film. I'm not recommending the film itself, but it is worthwhile to watch just to see David Bowie playing Andy Warhol, because he picked up a lot of Andy Warhol's mannerisms, the way he held his body, the way he wore his clothes. Strangely enough, and I still can't believe it, but the Andy Warhol Museum loaned Bowie one of Andy's wigs and also Andy's black leather jacket from the 80s. And so he is literally wearing one of Warhol's wigs in the film. So if you ever get a chance to check that out,
this isn't really saying much, but I would say it's one of Bowie's better performances on film. I will also admit, Dee, I had this. I was an owner of this VHS tape.
You owned it.
I had that. Quite what my dad made of that in 1996, I don't know. But look at how ultimately 90s this is. Not just the font and the front cover, but look, Jeffrey Wright, Bowie, Dennis Hopper, Gary Oldman,
Parker Posey, Courtney Love. I forgot.
Del Toro. I mean, isn't that the most 90s thing you've ever seen?
Benicio del Toro. I forgot they were all in it. Amazing.
I didn't watch it more than one. I had them all. I had Absolute Beginners. I had. I even had. There was this other shitty film he made in the 90s called. It had Goldie in it. What was that called? Bowie and Goldie.
Yes.
That bloody movie called? I had that one as well.
By the way, speaking of Courtney Love, Bowie ended up moving into the building where she lived. So the building that had Bowie's penthouse, which he lived in from 2000 until his death, he was neighbors with Courtney Love, and apparently had on several occasions to go down to her flat and tell her to turn her music down. Imagine David Bowie coming and telling you your music's too loud.
Well, she took it badly, obviously, because what happened to her. Can I just say as well, that movie was called Everybody Loves Sunshine.
Ooh.
Bowie plays like this kind of gangster with Goldie. Utter shite as well. That is. Yeah, he's better as Warhol than he is in this movie. So there we go.
Yeah. I kind of like the look though. Get Goldie, of course. God's sake.
All right. So.
So yeah. Warhol.
Outside,
Basquiat.
Outside gets the thumb up.
Outside gets a thumb up. Basquiat does not get a thumb up, but it is enormously entertaining to watch Bowie doing Warhol.
I mean, if I had to rank Bowie film performances, I do like Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence. I can't, Man Who Fell to Earth.
Yeah.
Obviously Labyrinth. But this would be maybe top 5.
It's up there.
It's 4th.
Yeah, I like Baal. If you've ever seen the BBC production of Baal, that is great. Yeah.
To me, though, nothing will ever top. You know very well where he is. He's up there in my castle. You have 13 hours in which to solve the labyrinth before your baby brother becomes one of us forever. Such a pity. And then he disappears. It's amazing. Anyway.
Go back to your door.
Oh, there's Dennis Hopper, look.
There we go. Yeah, Dennis Hopper is Bruno Bistrophaget. Yeah, and I can't remember who played Basquiat. And I just love the. Bowie got the blank. Bowie got the blank, catatonic stare of Warhol. He got that done very well. And again, that is Warhol's actual jacket. I can't believe they lent him a jacket and wig.
It's pretty cool,
Yeah.
All right.
There they are. Yeah.
Of course, I will say that I'm not a fan of the as we talked before about the relationship, the idea of the because I remember we spent almost a whole stream on Basquiat. Do you remember?
Well, very very important for Warhol in the 80s. So I quite like Basquiat. Also, I should note that Bowie owned 2 Basquiat paintings, which were the 2 highest priced items at the auction of his art collection after his death. So, G. Henry. Oh, these are great.
What's this here?
I just liked it because it just seemed very 90s to have Bowie posing outside of a pyramid in Mexico.
Isn't there a track called 7 Years in Tibet on the?
But this is Mexico. This isn't Tibet. Yeah, I was interested to learn that he only ever played in Mexico once in 1997. The only concerts he ever gave in Mexico were that year. Never, his tours never went there before that. So.
And here we
I
are.
can't remember the name of that pyramid, but it's in Mexico. Is that Tenochtitlan? No, that's anyway. So then, yes.
Yeah, so now we've reached Earthling, which I remember being quite a big deal when it came out. Yeah. But I say that from the perspective of being a Bowie fan at that time. It didn't actually chart that well. Only reached number 6 in the UK chart D. And it only stayed on the chart for 4 weeks, which is pretty poor, really. And in the US, it charted at 39. So kind of bombed. It's a little bit surprising to me because this was pretty heavily promoted. I remember.
Yes.
The video for Little Wonder was everywhere. when it first came out. So
I had gone to New York for the first time in '97, and I remember seeing this poster everywhere. Like it really, you're right. It was really heavily promoted in America as well. Yeah, Earthling.
I'm trying to remember the designer of that jacket.
It's Alexander McQueen and Bowie did it together. But yeah,
Right.
Alexander McQueen, who I believe committed suicide in the 2010s, but and he wore that jacket a lot. He basically many of the shows he did right around this time. He wore that.
And this was right in the cool Britannia era. I don't know.
God!
I don't know if Bowie
97.
went to meet the Dark Lord himself in 1997. I don't think he did. He's not quite that bad. Unlike Oasis, who went to meet the Dark Lord in Downing Street. I don't think Bowie went, but this cover and the Union Jack in particular were quite prominent at this time.
Yeah.
And I remember that in the press, in the music press in this sort of period, they were kind of talking about this album and this cover in particular as Bowie kind of like accepting the mantle of his crown or something, or accepting that he is like the kind of living king of rock or whatever. There was a lot of bullshit like that talked at the time, if that makes any sense, of like, he is our most prominent living artist and all this. He embodies what it means to be, a great British artist and all of this. And all of that is true, but yet still somehow cringe.
It's very cringe. Yeah, very cringe.
Yeah.
Colonel Crayon says that Bowie was given his Brit Award by Tony Blair.
So there we go. Cool Britannia can be said to start with Bowie handing over the Brit Award. I remember that now, actually, because when we talked about doing this, I went back to watch that performance and somebody pointed it out. And yes, he's right there in 1996 as the leader of the opposition, of course, not even prime minister yet. And he's handing Bowie his Brit Award. Talk about marketing genius on the course of New Labour. You'd never think of a politician going to the Brits, would you? So
no.
Blair, a pioneer in propaganda techniques,
filthy propaganda. Yeah. Also, I forgot to mention during speaking of politicians, if you look at the Wikipedia entry for Outside, there's a picture of Bowie with Bill Clinton for some reason.
Oh no!
Yeah.
Is it because Bill Clinton also liked playing the sax?
I don't know. He went to visit the White House in 1995 for some reason. Bowie
I'm going to see if I can find that picture of Blair, and oh my god!
Oh no!
Oh, I have to show this because it's
it's your favorite. Yeah.
Look at that! My two teenage heartthrobs coming together. Look.
Oh my
Blair
god.
and Bowie together. Oh my god!
Let's see it. Let's see it.
Oh dearie me! Look, there's him arm with Tony Blair. Holy shit!
God.
But honestly, I've been finding the Dark Lord everywhere recently. Like he's omnipresent. Like there's from about 1996 onwards, there's no historical event that he doesn't have his hand in. So.
The last paragraph of 1984. He looked up into the dark moustache, and two gin-scented tears rolled down his cheek, and he admitted he loved Big Brother. That's going to be you. One day you're going to have the apotheosis, and you're just going to realize that.
I think it may have already happened. I think I'm just ready. I'm ready for Blair to come back. I honestly am.
I knew it.
Because he's, say what you want, he's more competent than our current lot.
No.
I'd rather a competent overlord, overlord, than an incompetent one.
No, I don't. No. I'm not going to stray into politics, but no.
There we go.
Yeah, he loved the Dark Lord.
So there we go.
Is that Damien Hirst? Anyway, get rid of it.
All right. We'll go back.
Reality. I mean, not reality. Earthling. Yeah,
Earthling, yes. Okay. Let's see if I've got any lore from Peg or from Buckley here. Earthling was a celebration. This is Peg. Earthling was a celebration of Bowie's exceptional relationship with the band that he had gathered together for the Outside tour. They're probably the most enjoyable set of musicians I've worked with, he told Alan Yentob in 1996. Again, the most mid-90s sentence of all time. Fucking Alan Yentob.
God.
What was that show what was that bloody culture show he presented all the way through that? It had like the bottle. It was like a bottle on the sea. I'm trying to remember what it's called now.
It was called
Come on, help us. Arena. That was it. Arena.
Yeah. I was gonna. I was actually going to send you the Arena episode about Brian Eno.
Alan Yentob. Bloody hell! What a he is like the very BBC idea of the cultured man, isn't he? Alan Yentob. He's kind of
He is. Well, I mean, don't forget he was the controller of BBC One and BBC Two. I mean, he was a controller of BBC Two until 1993, and then went to BBC One. So
Bowie said, "It's the greatest fun and satisfaction I've had with a band since the Spiders." In April of that year, he recorded "Telling Lies" alone in Montreux as a template for the sound he wanted, and the song was premiered during the Summer Festival's tour. In late August, Bowie took the band to Looking Glass, the Manhattan studio, owned by Philip Glass.
Philip Glass, yeah.
Yeah, where, incidentally, the Low and Hero Symphony were also recorded. An important new arrival was the engineer, Mark Platy, a New Yorker who has cut his teeth at Arthur Baker's Shakedown Studios before working with Prince on Graffiti Bridge and at Looking Glass with artists such as D-Light.
D-Light?
Yeah, D-Light.
D.
In addition to engineering and co-writing several tracks, he and Boo Reeves Gabrels took second billing as co-producers. Behind Bowie himself, for whom Earthling was the first self-produced album since Diamond Dogs. I knew exactly what I wanted, David explained. We didn't have any time to pull in a co-producer. I just sort of went for it. Speed and spontaneity were the keynotes of the sessions. There was no afterthought. It was very immediate, very spontaneous, and it virtually put itself together. Writing and recording, 2.5 weeks, and then a couple of weeks mixing. It was really very fast, and that's not the first time, is it, Dee, that we've Bowie has recorded extremely quickly from start to finish.
That actually is a kind of hallmark throughout his career. He most of his records were done, and he and as we said on past streams, he liked to do things in one take or two takes at the most.
So, I mean, how would you say that the sound changes from Outside to Earthling in general?
Well, I think it certainly becomes more, I don't want to say more commercial, but it does. I mean, it becomes much more a record of its time. I mean, my problem with Earthling is I think it sounds too much of its time. To me, it sounds very dated. It's filled with kind of industrial electronica bits and bobs and that type of production, that type of instrumentation, the same sort of collection of electronic instruments, and it a lot of the record sounds it's redolent of its era. And I think that one problem is that I think for a while here in the 90s and the 2000s, Bowie was following rather than leading. Rather than being a kind of innovator, he's kind of following on the heels of people who are doing more popular versions of these things. So that's my sort of general assessment of Earthling. But
yeah, one thing that struck me when I was listening to it earlier on is that yes, there's the drum and bass and the jungle.
Yeah.
But to me, the sound of Earthling is a lot more spare, if that makes any sense, than what would
Yeah.
have been in the charts.
It's not the big ugly mess that that we
I mean,
got.
I remember,
with some earlier
like,
effort.
remember by 97, 98, guys like Fatboy Slim were around, and Chemical Brothers, and like the whole dance thing had got quite commercial by that point, I would say. And even Prodigy were kind of a pretty mainstream chart act. And listening to it, I do think the Earth thing is a bit more stripped back than what you would hear in contemporary dance at that time. It's almost like a slightly more primitive take on what it is. I was also struck by the fact that you have this pull on the album, perhaps from the Malign Gabrels, towards what I would describe as post grunge again. It's that whole. It's much rockier. I'll just put it that way than your typical drum and bass album. There's a lot more of a pull to industrial rock on the album. Less than on Outside, but it's still there, and you can hear it on 7 Years in Tibet, for example, or all the songs really. So I do feel, because that's a very of its era as well, though. I'm not saying that rescues it from sounding contemporary. I'm just saying that oh, sorry, D, I didn't realize you'd gone. Can you hear me?
My router cut out. So I
missed sorry, I was just saying that there's a pull on the album towards post grunge, and kind of so it sounds rockier than your typical. Like, I'm just remembering some of the stuff that was around, like Josh Wink, Higher States of Consciousness, or I always like to mention that one, or Robert Miles, Children. You remember that? So it wasn't like kind of contemporary fucking techno or like Euro dance or any bullshit like that. It is actually quite authentic to the roots of drum and bass or jungle. But I did come across a review earlier on, D, where they were pointing out that one of the problems is that so let's say on Young Americans back in the 70s, or on Station to Station, when he was dabbling with these other genres, the people who he brought in were masters of that genre. But it's not like Bowie went out and hired like Prodigy to help him out, or any hotshot producers. All of these guys on the album were not techno guys or jungle guys or dance guys or whatever.
Right.
So there's an element of this record that sounds like old men playing around in a way.
Exactly.
With a contemporary. So.
Which is what they were. I mean, these are all men. I mean, these are all men around age 50. Including Bowie himself. Playing with something of a younger generation sound.
Just as a kind of, alternative history. Just imagine what if. What if Bowie had hired the Chemical Brothers or Liam Howlett or something to come in and produce this? Do you think it would have been a better record for it, or do you think it would have been even worse?
Difficult to say.
Or FX Twin was around this time. They could have brought him into.
Yeah, someone says Bowie should have listened to more Aphex Twin. I think that's certainly true. I think it seems like a natural fit because I love Aphex Twin, and I think that his sort of experimental nature seems like something that Bowie would really liked. But
I seem to remember Oasis started, or one of the Gallagher brothers did something with. Was it the Chemical Brothers? There was that Setting Sun track.
I think it was the Chemical Brothers.
There were a number of those kind of crossovers around this time, and they're not bad. They don't like.
No.
Okay, they sound of the era, but they're still pretty good. It's pretty good material, is what I'm saying. That said, I don't want to sell everything short, because I do think that, despite sounding of its time, if you can put your mindset back in 1997, it's kind of a good. I think it's a good album. I mean, Little Wonder, Looking for Satellites, Battle for Britain. That's probably the strongest open to an album since Let's Dance.
It's his best record since Scary Monsters.
It's his best record since Scary Monsters, D. changed my mind.
Uh,
No, but it's good. Like Little Wonder's a good song.
yeah,
Looking for Satellites is a good song.
yeah.
Battle for Britain's a good song.
Battle for Britain's a good song. 7 Years in Tibet, yeah. Also, 7 Years in Tibet has the cringe sort of. It's almost like an issue song, you know.
Also, listen to this line from Buckley, and this just sums up everything about my feelings about this man. Gabrels' haunting guitar part is based, so he revealed, on Fleetwood Mac's Albatross. I just fucking, I just, it's just
Fleetwood Mac.
like, why is he trying to drag it there? You know?
Haunting.
Yeah. Dead Man Walking says Bowie's starting point was his intention to make a techno track in the spirit of Underworld, then enjoying success with the single Born Slippy, featuring the film Trainspotting. Now, if you were around in 1997 or in the mid-90s, that Trainspotting soundtrack was everywhere.
Yeah.
I think everybody owned a copy of the Trainspotting soundtrack, and it was my personal introduction to Iggy Pop, among other things.
Amazing.
But that Born Slippy was an absolute banger, and it was everywhere at that time.
Yeah.
But doesn't that go to your point, D, about chasing fashion rather than leading it? Like, why is Bowie listening to bloody lager shouting and saying, "Yeah, I want to do that"?
Yeah, that's what I want to do. Yeah, I want to go from I want to go from fucking low to like being a fucking, yeah. Well, and that's why I don't like this whole period. I mean, it's fine. This album is perfectly fine, but it's just like, why are you doing this? You're David Bowie. You know, you're not. You know, it's like if Cliff Richard had done a drum and bass track. I mean, it's just
that's a bit. I mean, I have my own theory as to why he made this album quite like this, right? Which is that I've tried to explain this before. Like around this time, you'd buy like Now 32 or whatever it was, and
with Josh Wink.
Yeah, with Josh Wink's highest, and the actual CDs would be split up, right? So you'd have one section of the CD will be like Take That and all that crap, like boy bands, Spice Girls, like hideously mainstream pop music, and then you'd have like a kind of like a Britpop section where you'd have your Oasis and Blur and Suede and Pulp and you know, You're Gorgeous by Baby Bird and fucking, you know, all of the stuff that was out around then. James's Sit Down would be on there. I'm just trying to think. Castaway, do you remember Walk Away by Cast? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember.
Who was that one? Bittersweet Symphony, The Verve were around.
Yeah.
It would be all those sorts of bands, and then it would be like, and now here's the dance stuff, and it'd be like Prodigy and Chemical Brothers and Josh Wink and you know, and various other dance acts. So you know, there was kind of a split basically between what was cool. Was it the Spice Girls stuff? Well, obviously not. Was it the Britpop stuff, or was it the dancer? I should say there's also a fourth category, which I would describe as American alt rock.
Yes.
Does that make sense? Which is again where Gabrels is trying to pull things, but you know, like the post grunge scene, and maybe like
Flaming Lips and the Foo Fighters, and you know,
maybe even at that time, like Radiohead would have been in there as well.
I mean, Radiohead would have just, I mean, OK Computer came. I mean, obviously they'd had big hits with that, you know, the
Creep,
yeah, their track, and that with their big record, OK Computer came out this year, but yeah, they would be included, and you know,
the Bends have been out.
And Tool, and you know, the Smashing Pumpkins were still vaguely relevant. Yeah,
it's okay. So in the era of the time, like you see, that stuff was American, right? That stuff was American. So in the British scene, you had the three different, you had the dance stuff, the Britpop stuff, and the chart stuff.
Yeah.
And I feel like Bowie was just, in a way, using this album to say, I still understand what's cool, and it's the dance stuff. That's the kind of future, not the
Mm.
Britpop stuff, which is backwards looking, and obviously not the chart stuff.
Yeah.
So in a way, that was kind of making a statement, because all of the people who were praising, like, it wasn't like bloody Keith Flint and Liam Howlett were in the press saying, "Oh, well, yeah, we love David Bowie." It was Damon Albarn who was saying that.
Yeah, Damon Albarn.
And Bowie, in his own kind of strange way, was signaling his allegiance to a different set of, like, he wasn't praising the Britpop guys. He was saying, actually, do this sort of stuff instead.
Right. Because it's sort of like I was actually there when the sound that you're ripping off was new, and that isn't where I don't want to go back there. So I'm going to go over here with all the kids. Because I'm a cool dad.
Yeah, I'm doing cool stuff, not this retrograde rubbish like Look Back in Anger or whatever.
Beatles, yeah.
Telling lie. I always kind of like Telling Lies. Not the song Telling Lies. Not
Yes,
not,
I know. Yeah.
There's The Last Thing You Should Do. Reeves and I did the entire track in a day. Drums, guitar, bass programming, etc., says Platty. David heard it, added the synth part in the middle, the descending piano part in the break. That's probably the best bit of the song, by the way.
Yeah.
Then did the lyric and the vocal in 20 minutes. Only a last-minute rethink secured the inclusion of this track, originally recorded as a B-side. So there we go. I'm Afraid of Americans. That was a good song.
It's a good song. It's my favorite song of this record and of this period. We should a little bit about this song. This song was actually built by Eno and Bowie back during the Outside sessions, and that version, and it was recorded, but it was not included on Outside. But that version of it made its way onto the soundtrack for Showgirls, which of course everyone should watch as one of the most absurdly terrible films of all time. So the Outside session version of I'm Afraid of Americans is on the Showgirls soundtrack. But this is a re-recorded, reimagined version, the one on this record, and this would go on to be remixed by Trent Reznor. Do you think that we could get away with playing just the video, just the first few seconds of the video, not without the music on the stream?
Probably, yeah. Probably.
Yeah, if you look up I'm Afraid of Americans 4K. So I don't know how they did this. It's on the official Bowie channel, but earlier this year, I think, or late to 2021.
I got it.
They released a 4K version of this video. I don't know if they upscaled it using some sort of AI, or if they rescanned the film and were able to make a. But it's amazing to see this video in that resolution.
During my Looney Tunes research, I've learned quite a bit about the whole process of transferring.
Yeah,
it's actually very difficult to do.
Very difficult to do.
So let's play a little bit.
I made some 16mm films in the 90s, and yes, I was involved in trying to digitize them, and it is not an easy thing to do, not at all. So yeah, let's just watch a few minutes of this, because I was just a few seconds.
There he is. There he is.
We see it. I don't. Wait, it's not on the screen. Am I stuck? Oh yeah, there we go.
There's Trent.
There's Trent Reznor.
Looking like the most 90s creature ever imagined, with the what do you call that? The soul patch or whatever.
Soul patch, yeah.
So there we go.
Yeah.
And was the idea here that he was trying to be like a kind of Columbine shooter type thing? Is that the?
I think it's sort of suggested. The other thing that this video, when I've watched this 4K version of it, I was really, it was emotional for me, because of course I had just moved there, and I lived and moved around in the neighborhoods that they're in. Like I recognize all of these places. Like these are all places that I was going at the time, and so to see this significant part of my past in 4K with David Bowie, it just was. It's very strange. So
Does he get mugged by a black guy here? Hold on.
he gets
a mugger.
menaced. Yeah, there's a sort of there's a lot of people doing gun motions. Yeah, I think he was. This was before Columbine, by the way, so it wasn't.
Oh, was it really? Okay.
Columbine. Yeah, I know every single street that they're on. I know every location there.
Do you think that New York still exists, or is it?
No, it's
heavily changed at this point.
It's very, very different. Yeah, I mean, keep in mind that this is 25 years ago almost. So they're playing the fact. Well, Trent Reznor had a kind of school shooter song, I remember, on one of his records that was kind of controversy.
That's what he said. Even Keith Woods wouldn't wear that polo neck. What do you think?
I love this, and I hate to tell people, but this era of I sort of dress like this. Like I have literally a paisley jacket that I wear. I don't wear it over a yellow roll neck, but I do sort of dress a bit like Bowie here. So yeah, just Trent Reznor running around, and then of course the video has a very odd conclusion.
What happens at the end?
Well, if you skip ahead, you'll see.
Oh yes, all right.
He gets into the cab with Reznor, and then there's these weird religious procession.
That is odd. Oh.
And Trent Reznor dragging the cross. I don't know. This is the part of the song where he says God is an American.
I see. I'm afraid of Americans too, Lee. They're very strange.
They're wonderful. I love them.
I mean, I think isn't that meant to be a takeoff of the that procession of death thing, the voodoo thing they do? Like, what's it called? I remember seeing it in one of the Bond movies. Has it?
Yes, the whole voodoo New Orleans voodoo thing. Yeah. There's a little bit Mexican Day of the Dead. Also, the end of the street there is a huge art supply store that I used to go to all the time, which is no longer there. So very, very nostalgic to me, that video. Weirdly enough.
Anything else about Earthling before we? I feel like I like the album better than you do, but then that's because I don't know. It's partly because I think maybe nostalgia for me, because it came out around. I listened to this one quite a lot when I was a teenager. So there is that last track, "The Law," where he says, "I don't want knowledge, I want certainty." So he kind of apparently that's a Bertrand Russell quote.
Not knowledge and certainty. Yeah.
Which is kind of strange because Bertrand Russell, of course, was a famous atheist who you can actually find having debates with F.C. Copleston and various other people about the existence of God. And I would say that the search for like an authenticity or a faith or whatever is all the way through this album as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I kind of like it though. I think it holds together. Like it doesn't have any of the extraneous elements of outside, like the spoken words sequences, or and it's just 9-10 songs in a row.
Yeah.
Bang, bang, bang.
It's not a bad record. No, it's not a bad.
I mean, unlike many of the albums we've looked at, I mean, compared to something like Black Tie, which is basically all shite. This one doesn't have any obviously skippable tracks, I would say. Like they're not egregiously offensive.
No, there's nothing that would make you angrily reach for the forward button. Yeah.
So I mean, I don't know. I mean, I have to think about where I'm going to rank these things and when I sit down and doing it. But I think Earthling will do better than a lot of albums. I'll probably put Outside above Earthling when all is said and done, but we'll see.
Yeah. It's a little more innovative, I would say. Outside.
So then,
Then well, I don't remember what. Oh yeah,
there's more pictures of the Union Jack.
yeah, that's just the shot. I just like this this Earthling period look that Bowie was sporting.
He was very like impish and kind of almost like devilly in his movements and things.
Yeah, especially the next picture,
which is again, I think, a bit of Keith Flintism. Because I think people will forget. See, these are the sorts of things that you won't really remember that much unless you were around. But the video for Firestarter was absolutely bloody everywhere. I don't know when Firestarter by Prodigy came out, but it had a huge impact on like the general aesthetic of things.
Yeah.
And I think that the whole idea that Bowie was following rather than leading was possibly because of just how Prodigy like he was in a lot of this sort of stuff, and especially if you watch the videos. The videos have got this frenetic kind of quality to them. Like the video for Little Wonder, for example, he's kind of, darting about. And that's, if you watch Prodigy videos, that's there in those as well. So, yeah. And the Union Jack, of course, which I think is featured in that Firestarter video, if I'm not mistaken. All right, so let's see what else there is.
We have
more Bowie stalking about, and now we get to Hours.
Oh,
well, so I've just realised you've got Earthling Bowie dying, with Hours Bowie kind of looking after him.
Yes, I mean he's doing the Pietà. He's doing the traditional pose of the Virgin cradling the dead Christ. This, by the way, just to get it out of the way, this is the second worst album cover behind the original Buddha's Suburbia. This is an absolute mess. This is also just, if you're familiar with graphic design in the late 90s, early 2000s, this is just like every cliche of graphic design from that period just shat all over one record cover. It's absolutely awful. All those fucking misaligned, misjudged typefaces. It's ridiculous. I mean, this is what also digital design and image manipulation did to design. It just destroyed it. It's the result of Illustrator and Photoshop just destroying designers' ability to do anything nice. Hate. But
I noticed you didn't try to recreate that Bowie on the front.
No.
Of the... I mean, where do we start? I mean, I can see if there's some lore from Peg or Buckley here on. A lot. In fact, I know a bit of lore behind this album myself, because one of the things that happened between Earthling and Hours coming out was a little game that came out called Omicron: The Nomad Soul.
the beloved Sega Dreamcast, which is a wonderful console. Yes, and
as I revealed on this very show before, that had a profound impact on my internet presence, because very early on I learned that having a name as I do, I would require a pseudonym, of which I've had hundreds, as everybody knows, because my name is quite easily Googleable. In fact, people sad enough could probably put my name in and find posts by me from the late 90s on David Bowie forums.
Wow.
I mean, I don't know. Last I checked, they were still there. Like, you have to go to like page 15 on Google or whatever, but there's me talking about Hours or something somewhere, or defending One Outside or whatever.
I've seen that.
So then I don't lie, D. I know what you do at 3 a.m. You've been.
There's a thorough dossier. You don't even understand.
Yeah,
anyway,
exactly. Yeah, I know your and so anyway, I made my name for many years on the internet, the Nomad Soul. named
okay.
after Omicron, the Nomad Soul.
Yeah.
I also had the game, and how can I put this? It's a very interesting concept for a game.
It-
Because if I remember it correctly, you as the person, as the player, are sucked into the computer game.
Yeah.
So the idea is that you're trapped in the world of Omicron, and it's taken your and then within the game, you as the player can occupy different people who live in that world.
Yeah.
And it had a number of selling points at the time. And one of the big selling points was that the game, or like the in-game world of Omicron, was living and breathing. That meant it carried on regardless of what you, the player, did. You know, the people had schedules. You know, they went to work. The NPCs, like, you know, they were just living and breathing. It was meant to be real. Whether they achieved all of that or not remains to be seen, I would say. But at least in concept, it was good.
It was a very, I would say, a very what's the word? Ambitious game, and it was quite impressive for the limitations of the time. I mean, the Dreamcast was an excellent piece of kit, and they did use it well. I mean, it doesn't hold up, as many games of this time don't really hold up, but at the time it was it was innovative. I don't. I can't say that it was a good game. I don't remember enjoying it. I never found Bowie in the game, by the way.
I can tell you why it failed to live up to its ambition, D, as a gamer and as somebody who plowed many an hour into Omicron, the Nomad Soul. Also never found Bowie, by the way. He was just too far into the game. And it had a really convoluted plot where you join a cult, and like there's all sorts of strange things that happen in that game. And anyway, the problem with the game is that there were a lot of mini game segments. So there was like a shoot 'em up segment. There was like an in-game beat 'em up, like a Street Fighter 2 style beat 'em up.
Yeah.
And the trouble with the game is that those mini games were shite.
Yeah.
Like it was a bad shoot 'em up. It was a bad fighter, you know.
Yeah.
And that was the problem, that the mini games were just terrible.
Well, it's funny because that was an old tradition. I mean, a lot of certainly British games, especially games that featured like when they would make a game of what was that show with all the builders who went to like Germany to work.
A game where the workers went to Germany.
No, there was a BBC. There was a sitcom in the 80s about where
Hello.
No, not hello. They'd all moved to Germany to work, and it was called Auf Wiedersehen.
Auf Wiedersehen Pet. That was right. Yeah.
So for instance, there was a Spectrum game of that. Like, as there was a Spectrum
Pet the game.
Yeah,
right.
There is an Auf Wiedersehen Pet the game, and there's games of every one of those shows from the 80s. But almost all of them are collections of shite mini games. And it's funny that even into the late 90s, they were still doing that with Omicron. Yeah.
There's actually Sid Meier has talked about this, and it's ironic because the game after which the rule is made, I actually rate very highly. In 1990, Sid Meier made a game called Covert Action, which had this problem where it was a collection of mini games, and the mini games weren't that good individually, and Maya thought that the player lost sight of the overall plot. Now, I happen to disagree with Maya because of the way I play games. I play with a notepad and a pen, and I quite like Sid Meier's Covert Action. But after that point, Maya made it a point never to do that again. I don't know if you ever played Sid Meier's Pirates, but that also has a bit of this where there are a lot of these like little mini games, and you lose sight of the overarching plot. But it seems like other people in the industry did not follow the Covert Action rule and were still doing this bullshit. as late as 1998, as we're talking about here.
1998. And also, people should remember that that Omicron: The Nomad Soul was directed by David Cage, who is the producer
Yes.
of such notable quick time event games like Heavy Rain and Beyond Two Souls with what's his name? Her name.
Would it be fair to say that David Cage, every game he's ever made has been overambitious and doesn't quite live up to the concept?
Fucking crap! Every one of them. I mean, Heavy Rain.
I remember my ex-wife had Heavy Rain. I just watched it. It was shite. I thought
I used to like to spoil it for people.
Yeah, it was Fahrenheit, another one of his.
Was it?
Yeah, I think my ex had that one as well. Fahrenheit.
Yeah, Fahrenheit. Yeah. Heavy Rain.
Right.
Oh, Detroit Become Human, which is also crap. I hate these sorts of games, but yeah.
It's unfortunate. Maybe somebody should have another go at doing Omicron, but make it good. So rather than like it being like the worst shooter you've ever played, have it be Half-Life or something, or rather than like the worst fighter ever made, make it Street Fighter 2 in there. Maybe it'd hang together a bit better if the actual mini games were good. Is what I'm saying.
Right.
Anyway,
Scott Shelby is the origami killer, by the way.
Because Bowie was in this game, he ended up doing a large part of the soundtrack for Omicron: The Nomad Soul. And ours really is a bunch of Omicron: Nomad Soul songs kind of polished up and made less sludgy, I guess. Begged up into an album. And then there's a few other songs on there as well. But you can't really understand ours without understanding that a lot of the material is from Omicron: The Nomad Soul.
Yeah, and in fact, if you listen to Recall 5, they have some of the versions from the game: Thursday's Child, New Angels of Promise, The Dreamers. Yeah, I mean, a lot of those were from that period.
Yeah, did you know that Something in the Air was on the American Psycho soundtrack?
Yes, a remix of that. Yeah.
So that's also on the album. I listened to this earlier on, D, expecting it, because knowing your extremely low opinion of it and expecting to just, because I remember kind of coping at the time and trying to defend the album, to myself and, on aforementioned message boards and so on. And therefore kind of forced myself to like it. But I remember it being a bit dull. It's a bit bland by Bowie standards, ours.
Yeah.
Listening to it again, it's a little bit off kilter. It's more off kilter and more kind of, I wouldn't use the word edgy, but it's kind of like, it's got those slightly arty Bowie touches to it that save it from just being like a straightforward, middle of the road alt rock album, which is what the reputation of ours is. I don't know. I mean, it just has a little bit of off kilter production on it. Do you not think?
I suppose. I mean, it is certainly a change of direction from Earthling. I mean, it's much more acoustic, and I just find it so boring. I can never get through it.
But by the way, I don't accept this idea that video games have improved a lot. There have always been good video games and shit video games. I don't. Just because Omicron: The Nomad Soul had technical limitations, I don't accept that. Therefore, video games are better now. There were plenty of games.
Yeah, there were plenty of brilliant games, certainly for the Dreamcast and the consoles of that era. I mean, a lot of
they weren't Nomad Soul.
They weren't Nomad Soul. Yeah. I remember what I played on the Dreamcast. Space Channel 5. I remember playing that. Which strangely enough, speaking of Delight, they were sued by the woman. What was her? Can't remember the name. Woman from Delight sued them for ripping off her image.
I mean, Deus Ex came out in 1998. I mean, Dreamcast wise, I remember a game called Shenmue.
Yeah.
Shenmue.
Which
that was good.
Yeah,
That was
which
good.
they just a few years ago they did this sort of fake crowdfund thing, and they got millions of dollars. I mean, people have been waiting for like 20 years for them to finish to make Shenmue 3, which did they do it now? I can't remember if they did. I don't
Someone
know if
said
they.
no play Deus Ex now. I want to slap that guy. I'm going to slap you, Matsuta. You're close to getting banned. This is, don't forget, if you go back in the deepest lore archives, we did a whole show on Baldur's Gate, which also came out in 1998. So
Baldur's Gate.
just you watch it, you disgusting sprog.
Golden Eye, someone says, yeah, certainly
Yeah,
for the
I mean, it's not. I'm not one of these people who's like, oh, the old days were better or the new days are better. But I do think in the area of video games, there's a lot of sloppy shit that gets done now, where it's like
oh yeah.
you get the opposite of technical limitations. You've got like, oh, well, because we can do all of this stuff, let's just shove it all in. You get a lot of bloat and crap in. I feel like streamlined principles of video game design, you get a lot of bad stuff, especially in the AAA games now. So
Too easy to make. It's too easy to make a game. It's too easy to make them.
yeah, so I disagree with. I'm not saying it's better in the old days or better in the new days. I'm just saying you can't make categorical statements like that.
No, absolutely not.
Okay, so anyway, when it comes to hours, there's Buckley says, after the febrile excesses of One Outside and Earthling, ours was seen very much as a return to melody and form, and for some a welcome one. The advance noise before the release mentioned the illustrious Hunky Dory in the same breath. Sorry, as the new music, and Bowie himself wrote in his blog that he was allowing himself to become as melodic as he had been for a good while. Yet in the scheme of things, ours, the reason for the lowercase and ellipsis is unclear, is only a minor work in the Bowie canon. Now, of that, we can certainly agree. It's a minor work. I don't know if D is still there. Are you still there, D? He's just muted himself for a moment. But I'm sure D would agree that ours is a minor work in the Bowie canon. All of Bowie's subsequent albums, however, would contain something of the spirit of ours. It was as if Earthling had been the end of Bowie's postmodernist phase, and after the revolution, order needed to be restored. So begins the neoclassical Bowie, as is in the order of things. I don't know if D is still away, but I would love to know what he makes of that take from Buckley there, that postmodern Bowie is over and this is neoclassical Bowie. What do you make of that take from Buckley, D? Neoclassical Bowie.
Yes, I've heard that neoclassical Bowie thing before. I don't know. I mean, what is classical Bowie? I don't even know.
Neoclassical Bowie, I would say, is very much defined by the next few albums, Heathen, Reality, and possibly into Next Day and Black Star as well, where it's like he's accepting his own legacy, and you can hear it's almost like you take all of the 70s and jumble it up. So it's like there's elements of his whole back catalogue constantly there. And rather than trying to be different, he's leaning into it and kind of, much like a neoclassical architecture kind of respects the old form. It's like, well, here's a little bit from Ziggy, here's a little bit from Lodger, here's a little bit from, rather than postmodern Bowie, which is basically Bowie trying to do drum and bass.
Yeah. Well, no, there is. And I mean, I think I've mentioned before on this stream or others that there is something that happens to artists, myself included, because of course I'm of this age. I mean, I'm almost the same age as Bowie was when he did this record, and it's sort of in the middle of a career. You do have there is a change in the way that you produce things and the way that you think about your work, and in many artists don't survive this transition. What will happen is you will have people who will burn brightly. Their flame will burn brightly when they're young and they first start, and they will go from just innovative success to success, and then at a certain point, in almost every artist and writer and architect and musician, that will end. That kind of creativity that flows from you like a fountain, it ends, and then you have to figure out, what do you do? How do you take, and hopefully you've developed the kind of sort of technical grounding and a reservoir of other sorts of inspiration to kind of sustain you. And I think this is certainly what Bowie was going through in this period. How to make that transition. I think he finally figured it out, but it took him a long time. And this may have been the beginning of it.
Just to give you some context as to what was actually going on around the time he made this album, February and March saw Bowie's live. This is Peg. February and March saw Bowie's live collaborations with Placebo in London and New York, where he also recorded his contribution to Placebo's single "Without You I'm Nothing." Do you remember Placebo being around?
I remember vaguely. I don't remember
a song called Nancy or Nancy Boy or something.
Yeah.
They were kind of big in 1999, I seem to recall. It was a short run thing, but they were big for a little period.
Yeah.
I'm sure they had a song called Nancy. Brian Molko, that was it.
Yeah.
Oh God, I'm just remembering this girl who was a massive Placebo fan and started to dress like Brian Molko in 1999. God's sake. Anyway, yes.
A massive Placebo fan.
Yeah, I mean, I just uttered those words, but yes, I mean, that sort of thing went on.
Yeah, it did go on.
Then he was asked to produce both Marilyn Manson and the Red Hot Chili Peppers, but by now he was too busy to consider either offer. Can you imagine a late 90s Red Hot Chili Peppers album produced by David Bowie?
David Bowie. Yeah.
I'm not sure if he was that great a producer, though, was he?
Well, I mean, he has Transformer, Lou Reed's Transformer.
And the Iggy Pop albums, of course,
and the Iggy Pop records. So yes, he certainly was at one point.
For other people.
For other people, yeah, and I think that makes sense. But I don't like Marilyn Manson. I always hate Marilyn Manson. So
yeah, I'm not a fan of that.
That's for kids, I think. But although he was also in Lost Highway, now that I think about it, so he was David Lynch Jason as well.
I will also say that another thing that people may forget about is that Red Hot Chili Peppers were huge in the late 90s as well. My brother was a big fan of the Red. I'm sure he'd cringe listening to it now, but that record Californication was absolutely massive.
Oh yeah. Well, I remember even much earlier. I mean, I remember in the early 90s having a paramour who was quite obsessed with the Red Hot Chili Peppers. So Blood Sugar Sex Magic, I think, was the record. Yeah.
I think Mrs. AA once told me she'd been to see the Red Hot Chili's like 15 times or something. Yeah.
Mrs. AA.
Mrs. AA was a
out of character.
Red Hot Chili's fan, yeah. But yeah, she was a fan going back to that early 90s period. But
yeah,
I think they picked up a whole new fan base with Californication.
Yeah, which I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I just remember it being everywhere in 1999. This was around the time my brother dyed his hair blonde like Eminem, which I still tease him about.
God,
I know. So tell me about it. He had the old dreadlocks at one point as well. He won't appreciate people me mentioning this, but
thank you for telling me. He's my arch enemy, so.
Yeah, you can bring up the fact he had blonde Eminem hair and dreadlocks at one time. So in the spring, Bowie and Gabrels entered CVU Studios in Bermuda to begin recording. In May, a month before the album was officially announced, David told reporters that he and Gabrels had been writing enormous amounts of material for several months, as many as 100 songs, many of them in an acoustic vein. We're recording most of the stuff ourselves, he said, and Reeves and I are playing most of the instruments and programming, etc. But I think you will all be surprised of the actual intimacy of it all. Gabriels would later reveal that 3 songs, Survive, we all go through, and The Pretty Things Are Going to Hell, were originally intended for his 1999 solo album, Ulysses. Oh my God, Reeves Gabriel solo material,
Solo
making it.
material.
Um,
Yeah.
He also explained that because the album was taking a decidedly more introspective turn, it meant that I needed to approach the guitar playing in a different way in order to wrap the vocals and support the mood of the song in the solos. As co-writer and co-producer, I had to be extra careful that the guitar player in me was responding to the lyrical content of the songs. So, yes. That's it for the lore on Hours.
I mean, also, I mean, there is a whole sort of religious thing going through this record. I don't care about the record enough to look into it, but I mean, I know that it's called Hours, which I would assume is a reference to the Book of Hours. And of course he's doing the Pietà on the front with a dummy of himself, and there's a cross burning crucified David Bowie in the inlay to this. So
you know, I'm absolutely thrilled to see somebody post Reeves Gabriels every single time. It's become a meme. It's become a meme. I'm so pleased about that. I mean, Thursday's Child was the lead single. I recall the video. And it's kind of alright, isn't it? It's kind of chart friendly, and
it's all
right. Something in the Air. That was, I mean, I remember reviews at the time would always pick out Something in the Air as a standout track. One of the strongest tracks on the CD, says David Buckley. This is a confession of a man who has fallen out of love with the world, with himself and with his partner. There's nothing left but empty despair, resignation, and uncomfortable, angry sadness. Live with the best times, let with the worst. I've danced with you too long, sings Bowie. That was the one on American Psycho.
Yeah.
Then there's Survive. Which that Survive has got pretty strong vocal on it, I seem to recall. Gabriel's all over it. It says he plays a 12.
Gabriel's life and education, born in Staten Island. Oh, okay. No, never mind. I just wanted to check something.
If I'm Dreaming My Life, yeah. Then there's, I mean, I remember 7 being a favorite when I was a teenager, because it's kind of, it's building from a busker-like opening and a George Harrison-esque guitar line from Gabriel. Bowie sings, "The gods forget they made me, so I forgot them too." A minor UK hit in the summer of 2000, reaching number 32. So, I will say that this album pretty much bombed. It was number 5 in the UK charts, lasted only 6 weeks, number 47 in the US charts. So,
good.
It didn't really set the world on fire.
No.
The trouble was, I remember at the time that Bowie had never sounded so like irrelevant in a way. It's just like, it's a pleasant enough album, but it's just, there's nothing to go
there's nothing to grab a hold of. It's just insipid. It just seemed insipid to me. I think Bowie was really lost, for this period.
Can I tell you the most interesting bit about Hours now, which is nothing actually to do with the music at all, which is, I mean, really, there's nothing to talk about here. Brilliant Adventure, which is a kind of instrumental, sounds like a kind of lost. It sounds like a kind of long lost Heroes outtake or something.
Yeah, it does.
The Pretty Things Are Going to Hell was another one that was often talked about in the press at the time as being a standout track, but
Crap song.
I mean, it really isn't. It's just forgettable. That's the trouble. It's just all forgettable stuff.
Yeah.
But now the important bit, which is my conspiracy theory about Bowie and ours,
Uh-oh.
which is
All right.
that okay? So you see on this cover here how he's got long brown hair.
Uh-oh. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Now
See it.
look
There
at
you
him
go.
there. Right, look at him here.
Yeah.
Look at him here, for example.
Yeah.
That was in the famous interview with Jeremy Paxman.
Yeah.
Now, can anybody explain to me how in the space of 1 year he went from looking like this, looking like that, to looking like that? And I have, after long and serious study, I have come to the conclusion that Bowie, for the duration of 1999, wore a wig. He wore a wig. This brown hair here is fake. Bowie never had long brown hair.
Is it a wig?
And I basically confirmed this by do you remember I was excitingly DMing you finding like Bowie Reddit groups and things where they discussed this.
Yeah,
and apparently,
literally like hundreds of posts, people arguing about it.
Yeah. But this was a few weeks ago, but like 3-4 in the morning I was posting to D, look at this Reddit thread on Bowie.
This is what goes on, people. I want you to know.
Look at this Reddit thread of Bowie's hair in 1999. And basically what really proves the point is he played Glastonbury in 2000, right?
Yeah.
Now, let me just pull up a picture of Bowie in Glastonbury. Glastonbury 2000 Bowie, right? Because I think he had his natural hair back by Glastonbury. Okay.
He's almost got the kind of early Bowie curly locks.
It's like hunky dory hair again.
Yeah,
right?
it is. Yeah.
This is hunky dory hair.
There we go. There it is. Yeah.
Now the thing is that in my years dating girls and so on, they always talk about like dye. Like if they dyed their hair, it takes time to come out.
Yeah.
And clearly, this Glastonbury hair has had he's had different hair dyes in that hair at different periods, right?
Yeah.
And it's grown out. Do you see how it's grown out over time?
Yeah.
You see? Whereas if you look at Bowie in 1999, you'll see this hair is like perfectly brown. Like this is not real hair. That's a wig.
And it's also he got that kind of cut where it's cut at sort of different lengths.
And do you see how in the Glastonbury Bowie, it's like kind of tousled and there are like split ends and that's real hair, yeah?
It doesn't look like real hair. You're right.
Whereas the
it doesn't look like his real hairline either. His hairline looks
the 1999 Bowie.
Yeah, that's hair.
Is wearing a wig. That's a wig.
He is wearing a wig. I think so. Well, I'll tell you something that makes me that I think also confirms this. Remember what he did in 1996, which is that he played Andy Warhol, and I think the wig got to him.
Yeah. Oh yes. Yeah. So he got into the wigs and he decided, all right. I mean, look at that. That's not real hair.
And strangely enough, Warhol used to get those wigs. They were very expensive, like $1,000. He would get them, and then he would take a pair of scissors and cut the hair to like all different lengths, which is exactly what Bowie's done there to his hair in the late 1999. So yeah, I'm with you on the wig. I'm with you on the wig theory.
Yeah, Bowie wore a wig. He wore a piece.
It doesn't. It really looks fake. That hair. It really does.
Yeah. And that's the most interesting thing I've got to say about ours.
The wig years. The wig.
I mean, there's another big kind of not to do with the album, but what Bowie was doing in his business life around this time, because he launched BowieNet in 1999.
Yeah.
And Bowie bonds, where you could buy shares in Bowie's back catalogue. Made him an awful lot of money, these moves, BowieNet and Bowie bonds. And at one point, I think he was only second to Paul McCartney in like music rich list stuff. Now we know from doing these streams that Bowie actually only really had that one commercially successful period in 1983, right, with Let's Dance.
Yeah, 83 to 85.
So
I would say.
how did Bowie become the second richest guy in music after Sir Paul McCartney? And it was through these two moves here, the Bowie net and the Bowie bonds. So
I'm going to read a little piece about Bowie bonds. Bowie bonds are asset-backed securities of current and future revenues of the 25 albums or 287 songs that Bowie had recorded before 1990. Bowie bonds were pioneered in 1997 by rock and roll investment banker David Pullman. Issued in 1997, the bonds were bought for US $55 million by the Prudential Insurance Company of America, or about $92.8 million in today's currency. The bonds paid an interest rate of 7.9% and had an average life of 10 years, a higher rate of return than a 10-year Treasury note, which at the time was 6.37%. Royalties from the 25 albums guaranteed or generated the cash flow that secured the bonds' investment payments. Prudential also received guarantees from Bowie's label, EMI Records, which had recently signed a $30 million deal with Bowie. By forfeiting 10 years' worth of royalties, Bowie was able to receive a single payment of $55 million up front. Bowie used this income to buy songs owned by his former manager, the evil, what was his name?
Tony DeFries.
DeFries, yes.
Yes.
Bowie's combined catalog of albums covered by this agreement sold more than 1 million copies annually at the time of the agreement. So Bowie made a huge amount of money, and he now owned again a lot of his back catalog, which is something, of course, that Paul McCartney and Yoko had to do fairly recently when they bought the Beatles catalog back from the Jackson estate. If you recall, Michael Jackson bought a huge catalog of Beatles songs. Bowie made a huge amount of money doing this.
And I remember he must have been pretty happy at the time because by making these business moves, he leapfrogged such people as Elton John. And we know from last week how much he hated Elton John. But he did it he didn't do it by selling records, is the point. He did it through.
He did it through this. Also interesting, I didn't know this, but shortly after, the rise of MP3 sharing caused music piracy to rise and music sales to drop, which was one of the factors that led Moody's Investor Service to lower the bonds from an A3 rating, the seventh highest rating, to Baa3, one notch above junk status. The downgrade was prompted by lower than expected revenue, quote, due to weakness in sales for recorded music, and that an unnamed company guaranteed the issue. Despite this, the Bowie bonds were liquidated in 2007 as originally planned, 10 years after their release, without default, and the rights to the income from the songs reverted to Bowie, which he made another huge pile of money after.
Masterstroke, because he was just in time for iTunes.
Incredible. Brilliant. And just before the crash in 2008. So
absolutely brilliant.
Very smart.
I'm pleased because we talked through how he was ripped off in the 70s and finally got the last laugh on the management. Many years
the
later.
Bowie estate is worth a huge amount of money. Yeah.
Now I will say that Peg has got quite a lot of quotes from contemporary reviews, which are quite amusing. Time Out dismissed the album as Bowie's most pointless and desultory record since Tin Machine 2. So we've got the reverse Scary Monsters.
Yes, the worst record since Tin Machine 2.
The Enemy considered Thursday's Child splendid, sweeping stuff, but complained that the rest of the album is a pale imitation of the same moody magnificence, let down by mediocre songwriting. In the Sunday Times, Mark Edwards praised the writing, but made no bones about his distaste for Reeves Gabrels, declaring that throughout the 90s, Bowie had been capable of writing songs with all the melodic brilliance and lyrical quirkiness of this glorious 1970s peak. Unfortunately, he then lets Gabrels smother them in unnecessary layers of guitar. Possibly Gabrels thinks he is avant-garde. He isn't. He just makes pointless noise.
Based. Who is that bass man?
That was Mark Edwards in the Sunday Times. So.
Incredible. And of course, notably, this was the last collaboration between Reeves, Gabrels, and Bowie.
Oh, fucking good riddance. Jesus Christ. So I think Visconti comes back soon, doesn't he? Not a minute
too soon.
Yeah.
Visconti comes back. They made up.
Now, just before we hit the super chats, this is not going to be an album that we cover, but both Peg and Buckley have an entry for the unreleased toy.
Oh,
which was leaked on the internet on the 20th of March 2011, and has actually been released now as part of that Brilliant Adventure box set. Is that right?
Yeah, I've got it, and I don't recommend it.
I only had a cursory listen to that a while back, and I don't really remember it being anything to write home about.
It isn't. It's not. It's an afterthought, and it shouldn't have been released.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything. It's not like some lost masterpiece or anything.
No, it isn't. It's basically him re-recording some of his oldest songs, with that band that he toured with for the beginning of the 2000s, which was like Gail Ann Dorsey and Earl Slick and Garson and Sterling Campbell and those that lot.
Now I have to say that coming into doing these streams, if you'd asked me before 90s Bowie or 80s Bowie, I'd have said 90s Bowie, but now I'd say 80s Bowie. Are you with me or not?
I'm with you. The 90s is just he just seems lost to me. He seems lost for most of it.
I also found the best internet review of ours anywhere online. Right. It's on Rate My Music, right? And it was written in December the 10th, 2020, by a guy called Smissunov. Mm-hmm. He gives the album 2 stars, and his review simply says this: Piers Brosnan vibe.
What goes on in this house?
and I don't know. There's something quite right about that. It's kind of like one of those Brosnan Bond films that aren't GoldenEye,
you just
listless,
don't remember. It's all sort of a blur. That's very good.
Sometime in the 90s. But yeah, I mean, I would. You see, the thing is that even though Outside and Earthling are better albums, I would say the high points from tonight and Never Let Me Down, as well as the highlights that I begged. Do you remember I begged up that 80s album last week from Labyrinth soundtrack and so on?
Oh yeah.
I don't know. I just think that if you take all those together, it's probably better than the filleted highlights of Outside and Earthling and
it probably of Suburbia. Day in, day out.
But we'll see when I sit down and try to rank them before next week. We'll see, because tonight is shite. Now that I think about it, like it's bad.
I mean, don't forget the fucking reggae song. It's bad.
Yeah, I don't know if it's an unpopular opinion that Lazenby was better than Brosnan. I really like that Lazenby film.
Everyone, I think everyone has reevaluated Lazenby. The Lazenby film is quite good. It's quite good.
Yeah, well, one day, D, our view of Never Let Me Down will be like the revisionist take on the Lazenby. Okay. Ours, I have to say, has got so little to say about it. It's not like it's offensively bad. No, it's not a bad album.
Yeah, it's not like Black Tie White Noise. It's just boring. It's just boring and it's featureless. It's just featureless,
Yeah, he just didn't have anything to. Even Bowie sounds a bit bored, says somebody on Rate My Music, and I think that's kind of true.
it's like a middle of the road hamburger. You're just not going to remember it.
All right, so let's hit some super chats then. So, here's the Eunuch says, "Back to Fresh Prince today, eh, lads?" Okay. Yeah, with black tie, white noise, I suppose. Here's the Eunuch says, "One thing I've noticed from these streams is that Bowie's ears seem to be rather low on his skull. I'd like to hear what you two think about his physiognomy." Yeah, well, what do you think about Bowie's physiognomy, D, with his ears being low on his
He's
skull?
got perfectly good physiognomy. I don't know. I don't dishonest nose. I don't know. No, I've
I
never
always
thought
think,
about it.
I always think that he's kind of a very unusual looking man, but
Yeah.
kind
Yeah.
of
Yes. Yeah.
he's good. He's kind of cool in his own way, though. I think.
Yes. He's got very distinctive looks. Yeah. He is very much like model. Sort of like a top model in that a lot of people who are so striking that there's something jarring about them. That it's not that they're perfect. They don't have perfect proportions. They just have very striking features, and I think he certainly
Kind of like
fit
an
that.
alien, you might say. Or,
Yeah, and
yeah.
I mean there's cheekbones. I mean you could hang your legacy off of those cheekbones. So
You see, I think that the right touchstone for Bowie isn't like he's a fashion. He's a fashion icon for a reason.
yeah,
He was a very like uber fashionable at all times,
yeah,
regardless of which kind of look he went for. He just was able to pull off all of these different looks and all of these different things, and that's why when he turns up in Zoolander, it's kind of believable that he's the only person fashionable enough to be able
yeah,
to judge derelict or whatever. So
yeah. And of
uh,
course he was also outside of it because I think he was a nerd at heart. I mean he sort of stepped into that role, but he was outside of it in a sense, and I think that is what gives people that special magic. When they are when they have to inhabit it rather than when it's a sort of innate thing,
but,
and quite
yeah,
appropriately married a fashion model.
yeah, and you see, I do think he was acutely aware of fashion at all times, in quite a conscious way, as we talked about all throughout these. I don't think Bowie was someone who didn't care about what was happening. I think he always did care about what was happening, which
Yeah,
makes him extremely different to, let's say, Bob Dylan, who, I mean, Bob Dylan's like the polar opposite of that, where he just doesn't know what's going on at any
no,
time, at
I
any
don't.
time in his career. You know,
I don't think he is. I don't think he's really known where he is since about like 1985. So,
um, I mean, maybe Bob Dylan would realistically release a song like "Wiggle Wiggle" on one of those albums and not give it another second thought. It's just be like, yeah, it's just a song. It's just a
yes, it's
song.
a
What are you on
song.
about?
There he is. Yeah.
And and it comes out in all like his own track selection. I've said this so many times. Like you buy the bootleg series, like why did you leave this one off? Why did you leave that one off? Why did how have you gone for this obviously inferior version on the studio? And you read like you read like his own explanation. He's like, yeah, it's just a song. I'm just a song and dance man. Whereas I don't think you'd get that with Bowie.
No, no.
If
I
you
don't.
excuse me a second, D, sorry, I think I've got this call from the doctor. So sorry.
All right. So I'll entertain you, folks. I can't see the super chat, so what should we talk about? Um, I'll just read some of the chat here. He was never fat. No, he was never fat. There is no fat Bowie. Period. I mean, he was very much healthier looking in the 2000s. He's sort of I think being a home being like a house husband and a family man certainly filled him out a bit more, but he never got fat. Pugin was an okay architect. Well, that's a bit out of left field, but yeah, I mean, there's some decent things that Pugin did. I'm not a huge fan of a lot of the excesses of the 19th century. Uh, let's see what else do we have here. Let's Dance is awesome. Where was the Ronson reunion? Well, Kit Spiken, sadly the Ronson reunion was in Black Tie White Noise, and it is such a non-event. I mean, it's just a damp squib. You barely even notice Ronson playing on that one track. I think the better reunion was that Freddie Mercury tribute concert when Ronson played Heroes and All the Young Dudes with Bowie. That's amazing, and that was, I think, the best that you're ever going to get in terms of reunion. And then, of course, Bowie worked with Ronson on, I believe, as we mentioned, the track from Ronson's last solo record. But by that point, Ronson was quite ill. But yeah, the actual album reunion in Black Tie White Noise is awful, awful. What else do we have? Yeah, Lundberg, that's a very good point. I mean, if you watch those performances of Bowie from, I would say, about 2000, 2001 until his retirement in a few years later in 2006, he's very happy, and he looks like he's having a ball. Some of those, there's an amazing show, which I wish that someone would find a high resolution version that you can see on YouTube, of him doing requests. So basically, people are calling in. Here's Betty from North, impacted New Hampshire, with a request for ashes to ashes, and he's very cute, talking to people, and very charming, and yeah, those are great. So a lot of those 2000s appearances are quite something, and certainly should be watched. What else have we got here? Thoughts on the Prestige? Quite good. I have to rewatch it. I haven't seen it since it came out. Bowie playing Nikola Tesla. What else do we do? Bowie was a big fan of Memphis. Yes, which I am as well. I love the Memphis design group. So it's basically an organization of sort of various designers, industrial designers, graphic designers, architects in the late 70s, early 80s, preceded by a sort of another one called Alchemia. But yeah, like Tori Sotsas, and Mendini, and Michael Graves, and all those sorts of people. Yeah, did that famous design, and a lot of what people associate as the look of the 80s came from, well, certainly was inspired by the Memphis design objects. A lot of people hate the Memphis stuff, but I quite like it. I've always been a fan. I love Ettore Sotsas, who was the Italian designer, who's kind of the spiritual center of that group. But Bowie had quite a collection of it, and when the Bowie estate was auctioned at Sotheby's, I believe, after his death, there were quite a number of Memphis pieces. Quite odd, because of course I own a couple of those pieces, not Bowie's versions of them, but so it's very odd to think of Bowie having those pieces as well. What else do we have here? Driving Saturday, that's on Kraftwerk. Kraftwerk is great. Loved Kraftwerk, and Bowie did as well. Obviously, we talked about Back with the Berlin trilogy. Kraftwerk was a huge influence. Neu, Cluster, Can, Faust, all of those groups. What else, people? Come on. You never mentioned the Kraftwerk lyric about that. Which lyric is that? Oh, from Trans Europe Express. Yeah, that's a good shout. Good shout. We didn't cover the Laughing Gnome, because what is there to say about it? It's a novelty track. We sort of skipped over the very early Bowie, because yeah, just what is there to say? Gas Spaceman. I don't know. Elias Seal. Hello, Space Boy. Oh, Colonel Crayon, are you on the wine again? Yep, Bing and Bowie, iconic Christmas duo. I believe that's one of the last things that Bing Crosby ever did. Hello.
Sorry, D. I'm back now. I had to take that. That was actually the doctor's test that you told me to book. So I
Good.
thought I have a blood test booked in for a few weeks' time. So
Excellent. We're going to sort you out. Yeah.
Uh,
So I was just chatting with them. So I don't remember where we were in the super chat.
I think I'd done. Oh yeah, Urban said there is an interview with Bowie and Trent Reznor where Trent awkwardly admits to him ripping off the main theme to Crystal Japan in his classic track "A Warm Place."
Oh,
So there we go.
wow.
I'm not that familiar with Trent Reznor material, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm vaguely. I don't like it. It's just a bit grim and miserable and slightly cringe. Not my sort of thing. Just that kind of nihilism. There's a few good things. Pretty Hate Machine, I think, which is actually an '80s record. It's quite strange to think of him doing work back then, but
I have to be honest. I'm not sure I've ever listened to a Nine Inch Nails album,
really,
like from start to finish.
yeah,
Uh,
it's tough. It's tough. Let me see what I've got here. Yeah, I've just got two. I've got the two that I would have.
I will say that Nine Inch Nails were massively more successful than David Bowie was in 1999 by selling
Oh,
the Fragile reached US #1. So
Fragile,
sold
ooh,
two,
the
two,
downward
two,
spiral.
two times platinum,
Wow.
two times
Okay.
platinum. Yeah. So
Yeah, the downward spiral. I mean, Hurt. So there's a song called Hurt, which was famously done as a cover version by Ring of Fire by I fell into a burning ring of fire. Yeah, well, why name? Come on, the girl from the North Country from Nashville Skyline, who does the duet.
Johnny Cash.
Johnny Cash, yes. So Johnny Cash did a cover of Nine Inch Nails' "Hurt," which was a big thing in the mid 2000s. I mean, there's a few good songs, "Head Like a Hole," but again, it was just all a bit too miserable and dark, and I think I was just too old for that sort of thing. Trent Reznor is a very odd period. So he bought the house where the Manson where the Manson murders occurred in California. I can't
Did he?
remember.
Oh right.
Yeah, he bought that house and he moved into it and made a recording studio. And I believe that most of the Downward Spiral, that record, was made in that house where what's her name? My brain is not working today. What's her name was killed. So yes, he's a bit it's a bit suspect. I don't know. And I think when he sold it, I think it was knocked down. It's knocked down. It doesn't exist anymore. But he kept the front door, which was of course smeared with blood and such from the murders. And yeah, very
Dark.
very very
Just
odd
dark.
character and slightly dark. Yeah.
I mean, I remember in the late 90s, people walking around in South Wales, wearing the fucking Doc Martens and the long black leather jackets.
Yeah.
That was the kind of whole Trenton Reznor look, wasn't it? The long black leather jacket.
But,
And I always remember one of my favorite bits from the Frank Skinner radio show, from whom I took Get Out, as I will tell people, is that Frank Skinner said whenever he would see people in the long black jackets, he'd say, "Ooh, Matrix." And I wish I'd done that now, because they didn't half look stupid walking around South Wales, walking like 4 abreast in their long black jackets, in the middle of bloody small town in South Wales. I mean, they should have been mocked, but anyway.
They should have. Well, of course, this all just I think the end of all that was the Columbine shootings, of course, because those murderers were dressed like that. And they had like long trench coats.
Yeah,
That.
no,
And
and that's why we were seeing it in reverse on the video that we watched, of course, because his whole look was like, is he going for the Columbine thing? But of course, the Columbine stuff was going for them.
going for them, yeah, and that all just became extraordinarily unfashionable very soon after that. So, but yeah, and I think that's sort of what he was doing. I mean, there's a song on Downward Spiral called "Big Man with a Gun," which is basically about a teenager going on a shooting rampage. So, so he probably directly inspired some of that, to be honest. So, yeah, there's something that's just slightly unpleasantly dark about Nine Inch Nails that I don't like, and I've never liked. So,
Do you know, by the way, I discovered something about UO regular binary surf earlier on today.
ooh,
So
does that have to do with anal sex?
it's not to do with anal sex, but it is to do with what we've been discussing here. So
Ooh,
here's a meme that's been going around. Ladies, there's been a misunderstanding. No one finds these attractive. See the ring in the nose there?
yeah.
Binary. There's a reason men sometimes go for women with these things. It's the same thought process. If she'll do that to herself, there'll be no complaining about insert preferred kink here. I speak from experience as a reformed goth chaser.
Oh,
So it's very possible that in the late 90s, binary was there chasing down the long black leather jacket women with the rings in their noses.
oh
So
my God. Oh, he was after him a big titty goth girl. Yeah.
My
Yeah.
gosh.
You know,
I remember,
I
yeah.
still see elements of the online right that do the mommy goth girlfriend thing. So
Yeah, I'm not a fan.
no. Ugh. You know, I wore Doc Martens, but I wore them in like 1990.
The bloody goth chasers. Do you remember I was telling you about that girl who was a massive Smashing Pumpkins fan? She was one of them. Kind
Wow.
of bigger girl, you know.
Roomy? Was she
Uh,
roomy?
she was a goth girl. I I don't know. I always hated all of that. I found it risible.
Yeah, the Frankenstein boots and yeah. Oh God's sake.
I mean, in a way, it's as disgusting as the mainstream culture. You know, you can imagine the mainstream culture is like, you know, Liverpool football fan, or like, you know, like back then in the late 90s, it was like, you know, Ben Sherman shirt. I mean, they'd wear Doc Martens too, of course,
Yeah,
but
they
with a
did.
Ben Sherman shirt and a clean kind of that whole look.
I still have my Doc Martens. I had blood red ones, and then I had purple ones, and I still had.
But then, yeah, there was that. I don't know.
Oh, Fred Perry. Yeah, the Fred Perry shirts as
Yeah,
well.
the Fred Perry shirt. Yeah, the Fred Perry shirt. Ben Sherman's,
Oh
and
God.
you know, a lot of in the 90s, of course, there was the Curtins haircut that some people had. I don't know. It's all, but you know, in my view, even back then, the alternative cool was as cringe as the mainstream cool. If that makes any sense.
It's true.
I've
No,
always hated
it's
both.
true.
I've always hated both.
Yeah, me as well. They weren't knee length that Doc Martens. They were just regular boot length. Oh, good. Lumberg had purple Doc Martens as well.
I bet Semiagog still wears his Doc Martens.
I bet he does. I like them, but I remember they hurt my feet terribly. So I have very high arches, and they're very quite painful. So
Oh yeah, I'm remembering it all now. The undercut. Do you remember that? When
yeah, yeah.
oh god, that
Boys
was
with the boys with their undercut, and the girls as well. As
ugh.
well. Do you
Oh, I
remember
hated that as well. I hated that too.
remember the Chuck Taylor uh those tennis shoes, the yeah, those canvas shoes that everyone wore. Sort of an American thing, but it certainly made its way into the UK.
I have a deep. I've just realised on this stream that I have a deep hatred of the late 90s culture.
Converse All Stars. Yeah, that's what they're called. You have a deep. I thought you were like a '90s person.
Yeah, but I also hate the late 90s culture.
Okay.
It's just risible. It's risible. It infected everything as well. Like some of the cringiest stuff you'll see is like I talk about the pro wrestling, the late 90s bloody new metal bullshit. Oh, for fuck's sake. And there were goths in wrestling as well. I remember Edge and Christian had this little minion vampire friend called Gangrel. They were called the Brood. They were like Undertaker minions, and they were goths. Oh, it's just so fucking cringy. I really hate that era. I hate it. Whereas I kind of, maybe because I didn't live through the 80s. I was a kid in the 80s. I've always just had fonder feelings towards 80s stuff than I do towards the late 90s era.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the '80s was. I mean, the '90s. You see, because I was an adult in the '90s, through most of the '90s. Certainly by the end of it, I was already, in my mid-20s. So I just, I certainly saw much of that shit for what it was. It's still more memorable than anything that happens now. I don't think anything happens now. I don't think there are styles. I think everything's sort of stopped and.
Everything's got stuck in like 2008 or something.
Yeah, it's just I don't. What do people do that you're going to remember as cringe? I don't know.
They just shake the booty and make the booty get fatter and fatter over time.
Yeah,
until in the end, there's nothing but arse left. I mean, am I lying? Have you seen those CK ads?
Just clap them ass cheeks. So disgusting. I can't even.
Years the Eunuch says, "I will tolerate no praise of Omicron's Nomad Soul. It had rubbish interface. It was written by a no-talent hack and was miserable to play.
Amazing.
Despite a decent concept, the product was absolute shite." As Years the Eunuch.
Right.
Well, we didn't praise it, did we, D? We echoed those sentiments.
I mean, it's a David Cage game, so of course it's shit.
Yes. Years is written in the chat. The future is just an enormous non-white arse. Yeah. Irving Spengler says, "In the early hours of this morning on Telegram, I was defending our honor against the wicked Fenian menace incursion. However, my account was banned. Also collateral damage. Please unban Daddy's source." Oh yes, this may have been when I just banned anybody defending the Irish menace.
The Hibernian menace. Hibernian menace.
They're just. Do you know? I almost bought a book of colonial era anti-Irish propaganda earlier, just to have access to anti-Irish material. It's got a superb title, by the way. It's called. Can you hear me still?
You've turned robot AA.
Oh, sorry. Hold on. That's because I turned Telegram on.
Okay, propaganda. Yeah.
Can you hear me again?
Yes.
Am I back? Sorry, I turned Telegram on.
No,
that's what happens when I turn Telegram on.
Yeah, your computer can't handle it.
Yeah, but I almost bought a book called The Eternal Paddy.
Is that even legal? Is that even legal over there?
It's an academic book. It's an academic study. I'll show you the front cover. It's absolutely
top of the morning to you. Oh, I want to teach you about the third position.
Eternal Paddy. The Eternal Paddy. Irish Identity and the British Press, 1798 to 1882.
Oh.
Now, I didn't know this until I started looking for anti-Irish 19th century memes, but the Irish were consistently depicted in Punch cartoons as monkeys in this manner, or as gorillas, or or as apes. Which I find kind of interesting. So there we go.
The sans potato. Well, I mean, of course, I say all this. Someone with Irish ancestry say, but I mean, my ancestors were smart, and they they got over being Irish.
And I didn't know this, but the anti-Irish propaganda followed them from the British Isles to America.
Oh,
They
it's a big
thought
thing.
that
A big
they
thing in
could. They
America.
thought they could go over to America to escape all of that, but
No.
they got it just as bad over there.
Yep.
So
Indeed.
um,
No Irish need apply was the.
you know what I say? Where there's no smoke without fire. And if it was any other group, you'd say, well, there was something there, wouldn't you? It's not a coincidence that everywhere these people go, the locals hate them, right? We wouldn't say it with any other group, would you? You wouldn't try to make those excuses for them. So I'm just saying the eternal party is real.
Look into who is at the top of many of the banks in America. It isn't who you would think.
There's a leprechaun at the end of that rainbow.
There is a leprechaun.
Anyway, Colonel Crayon says, I mean, any dreams of reconciliation between me and the Irish have been dashed over. We'll talk more about this tomorrow. Over their terrible behaviour over the death of the late Queen Elizabeth II.
It wasn't just the Irish, though. Let's be honest.
It wasn't just the Irish. There were several other groups who disgraced themselves, but they were notable. I would say.
We're used to those groups disgracing.
Yeah, like those groups aren't like meant to be on our side, or they don't align themselves with us. But these were Irish who were like in our groups and things.
Can we get Keith Woods
openly disrespecting the Queen?
Can we get Keith Woods on tomorrow?
Get who on tomorrow? Sorry.
Can we get Keith Woods on tomorrow?
No. Colonel Crayon says Bowie with Annie Lennox looks like Bowie with a young Bowie.
Yes, people pointed that out. Yeah, that him singing a duet is like him. It's like 92 Bowie singing with like Aladdin Sane Bowie.
Ludovica says Heathen was my intro to Bowie. Please be kind to it. Well, we'll talk about Heathen next week as we get into the final chapter of Bowie's career. In many ways, by the way, I should have said that ours, I think, points in that direction, but he hadn't hadn't really figured out how to do that yet.
Yeah,
probably because of the unwelcome presence of Reeves Gabrels.
The subversion of Reeves Gabrels, yeah.
Colonel Crayon says Brosnan's architectural talents rival Bowie's musical talents. His work is very well rounded, larger than life, and inspired by Reuben. D knows. What? Are you talking about Piers Brosnan as an architect, D?
Yes, he is a noted architect. He is a noted architect. He's quite well known for his capacious structures with massive domes. Yeah, I don't know how you don't know about his architecture.
What?
Yeah.
Piers Brosnan architect posting.
Yeah,
the architect is based. What is this? The architect is based on the theory that Piers Brosnan is a weight gain fetishist who intentionally fattened his wife. What?
A great.
What are you talking about?
Just do a Google image search for Piers Brosnan architect, and you'll see what I mean.
Is this? Oh my god! Is this? Is what you're talking about here?
Yeah. His missus has become healthier and healthier over the years, and he seems very happy. So there you go.
From £127 to £253
based.
So the meme is that Piers Brosnan is a feeder, basically.
Yeah.
I see.
And like if you Google, like, change your query to Piers Brosnan whaling, I think you'll find it. You'll find it.
Oh my god! Piers
Look,
Brosnan.
he's very happy. The picture from the Whaling Museum. You see it? It's
leave him alone. He loves her. I mean, he's obviously stuck with her.
Oh yeah, no, it's wonderful, baby.
My God.
There's one with an ice cream truck as well. That's quite good. But, we're very,
come,
very happy.
come on.
Very happy.
All right. I
Anyway.
kind of feel bad looking at that. Okay. Yes. So Brosnan then. Well, I suppose for the first time ever, we've set him up to come in. Just before we get out of here, do you have anything you'd like to promote?
No, tune in tomorrow for UO, and we'll be having a. I don't know that you've approved my plan, but I thought it would be nice to just have a kind of
Talk about the Queen.
non-political, a mostly non-political celebration of Her Majesty, and the new king, of course.
Yeah, I kind of dug. You know, there's that bit where he shooed away that guy with the pen,
The pen.
which the leftists pounced on. I actually thought that was his best bit. That was his most base bit.
Yeah, that table was far too small for those huge instruments on it.
Well, he'd already told them once.
Yeah.
So listen to the king, for God's sake.
My other favorite part is that there's a very, very long bit where he has to just promise the bloody Scots that he's not going to screw with their Kirk. And so basically Penny Mordaunt, who I ended up liking more watching that. I thought she
I did as well. Yeah,
I thought she did really well for their. I mean, she I hate to say it, but she makes Liz Truss look like a fucking moron. But yeah, I loved where she had to read all those bits and that Charles just had to say over and over again, approved. So that's my word for the week.
Oh my God. Sorry, D. Heart FM. P.S. Brosnan, incredible response after friends offered a wife weight loss surgery.
What?
P.S. Brosnan has responded to a friend who claims he offered his wife weight loss surgery. He's hit back at cruel friends and said, what did he say? Because I strongly love every curve of her body, she is the most beautiful woman in my eyes. And also because she had our 5 children. Yeah. In the past, I truly loved her for her person and not only for her beauty, but now I'm loving even more that she's my children's mother. I'm very proud of her. I always seek to be worthy of her love. P.S. Brosnan's incredible.
Yeah. No. I mean, the architect thing is out of pure admiration. I mean, he's a wonderful person, and they have a wonderful marriage, and it's great to hear that. Fuck all those people who give him problems over that.
P.S. Brosnan, the most wholesome man in the world. Yes, also buy my courses, join the channel, buy a mug, tune in for Unpopular Opinions tomorrow. But most importantly of all, ladies and gentlemen, get out.
What goes on in this town is none of your business.
As long as I'm living here, it is.
Then maybe you shouldn't be living here!
Well, that's easily fixed.